Welcome, everyone. This is episode 82 of the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast. My name is Dan, and it's that bit at the beginning of the show where I introduce my good buddy Phil. How is it going, Philip?
I'm very good, thanks. This is my last show. I'm off. There's I don't know if you noticed, there's been an opening at Tabletop Tactics. I'm obviously going to get it. So this will be my last show, guys.
Are you for real applying for the Tabletop Tactics role that's going to become available soon?
I mean, who wouldn't want this magnificent beard on the telly box?
I mean, you are potentially starting a campaign now to, get people to get you on the show. But here's the thing. If you even got it, would you want to move to Bath?
Not really. I've got an ex-girlfriend there. I think it'd be a bad move.
One ex-girlfriend in the whole of Bath.
Yeah. I mean, it was enough to make me not want to ever go back. So, yeah.
Oh, I see. So that might be the barrier to entry. Are you going to pitch that they need to move their thriving wargaming business to your location?
Come to Oxford. It's a lovely place. Great city.
Yeah. I believe they moved to Bath, though, in order to be a little bit more economically viable with their space, as it were, because they were in London before, right? So
exactly.
Now, yeah.
Oxford is like the second or third most expensive city. So, it is cheaper than London, not cheaper than Bath.
I mean, it's cheaper than parts of London, not the whole of it, I would say. I think,
well, yes, that's probably true.
That is probably how it goes. The other thing that was interesting, did you see that GW has announced they're not doing pre-orders anymore?
Well, for a few weeks, right?
For a few weeks. But wasn't like AdMech supposed to be coming out?
Probably.
Well, they advertised or, covertly advertised that it was going to come out in April. But now they've said that they're not doing pre-orders to May. So does that mean AdMech is now going to be May?
Next month. Yeah.
Yeah. False advertising there, mate. That's all I'm saying.
There's been a lot of it going on.
Exactly. They'll retcon. They'll go back into the old articles and be like, no. We never said that. Don't be silly.
Exactly.
Such is their way. But on the topic of things that people say, hey, you like those transitions? Yeah. Mate, I'm working them. What are we talking about today, Phil?
Well, we've got this fantastic book again. It's all shiny and glossy. It's the Book of Rust has made an appearance again in our lives. And we're going to be talking about the Armies of Renown. Ooh.
Who doesn't love an Army of Renown? I guess we'll discover when we get into that. But before we do that, we have, of course, this 5-star review.
Well, howdy, partner. These boys keep joshing us about with all their chitter-chatter about little plastic figurines. They've asked me to do this jingle for them. I don't know what they're talking about half the time. But anyway, now it's time for that 5-star review. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the show. And let's all pray that it doesn't go on as long as it did last week. Yeehaw!
This week's 5-star review comes from Apple Podcasts of where, Phil?
Oh, let me guess, it's the UK again.
Wow, you're supposed to say Great Britain, but I will take the United Kingdom of Great Britain.
Do we get half a point?
You get recognition, some acknowledgement. We are downgrading this review to a 4.5 review due to Phil's inability to remember to say Great Britain as opposed to UK.
We've only done it a couple of, 83 times.
Who knows? We didn't. This is I say relatively. We've been doing it for at least the last 40 episodes.
Yeah,
which
didn't start
Which suggests that we've obviously had 40 5-star reviews, at least.
Easily.
Look, the benefits of this segment are showing themselves at every available opportunity. Look at that. 5-star reviews as far as the eye can see. Everything the light touches.
Exactly. We're swimming in them. They're everywhere.
Swimming in them. Not to suggest, though, that you, the listener, should be disenfranchised, discouraged from giving us a 5-star review, because we love receiving the 5-star reviews, and we're always on the cusp of running out. So, we're always, what is that thing? It's like when
paddling in water.
Yeah. What do they call that when you would lose your job? What's it like? How long it takes you before you're completely destitute? That kind of calculation. Doesn't that have a terminology?
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway, yeah. Well, you know, in this case, it wouldn't take us too long. If we stopped receiving 5-star reviews, we would
lose our jobs, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't lose our jobs. We'd lose our home pretty quickly, as it were. We could only pay the rent.
In 5-star reviews. But dear Mr. Gasman and Mr. Mortgage Advisor, here's a 5-star review to keep us going for another month.
Exactly. I walked up to McDonald's the other day and I handed over a 5-star review over the counter. They didn't give me anything. It's weird, isn't it?
What a shame. I
thought maybe because, you know, NFTs or whatever they're called are all the rage these days. I thought maybe they would like to be the owner of a 5-star review from someone else, but no. Didn't even buy me a hamburger, and that thing's like 79p.
No, cheap.
Terrible. Couldn't even amount to 79p. Not that we don't think they're valuable, because obviously they are. Let's not. We're sending all sorts of mixed messages here, Phil. Let's just get on to the review itself. Obviously, if you'd like to leave one yourself, please do so. This review, believe it or not, Phil, says amazing 5 stars, as is obviously a prerequisite for the 5-star review. Again, I'm getting into quite a familiar patter here, aren't I, Phil?
Exactly.
Technically. Hey. Anyway, it's amazing. I've been listening to this podcast for a few months now, and they are the best, Phil, the best 40k podcast I've heard. Their content is amazingly informative while still managing to be entertaining and not dry. No. Keep up the good work. Check it out, man. And that came from Brob the Heart One. Brob the Heart One.
Brob, like B-R-O-B.
Well, yeah, I'm supposed to have called out Brob the Heart One before getting into it. But yes, Brob the Heart One. B-R-O-B. And he doesn't even actually spell heart right. He says Hurreet. H-R-eat. Okay, so Brob the H-R-eat One.
Could be bro, but Bert.
Brobert.
Brobert
Turt. I don't know. We probably don't need to completely second guess it. But look at that, mate. An amazing 5-star review declaring us the best 40k podcast out there and not dry. I couldn't possibly think of any dry 40k podcasts out there. They're always the finest, aren't they?
Well, I'm sure they are. But we are, if we're not the driest of the dry, we are certainly the wettest of the wet.
The moistest.
We're the moistest podcast out there.
We're dripping wet, is what we are.
Dripping into your ear holes.
Oh, that probably went off into a strange realm where none of the listeners wanted it to go. Nonetheless, could you please say thank you to Brob the Heart One or Brubert Hurt One for his or her 5-star review?
Brob or Brobert. Whatever your name is, or however it's spelt, we appreciate this fine, solid review. You haven't just said we're okay. You haven't said we're one of the best. You've said we're the best, which is obviously 100% the truth. We're also not the driest of the dry because we're the wettest of the wet. So thank you very much for being 100% spot on in this review. Keep it up.
I mean, the way you said that, Phil, it wasn't necessarily how you said it. It's how you look as you deliver it. If anything, that would be a reasonable reason for us embracing video podcasting, right? For those kind of expressive moments that you just put across to for my eyes only.
No, it's an exclusive behind the scenes look.
We did actually put out a photo of our recording process last week, didn't we? Which, much to my dismay.
Over on the Instagrams, I took a sneaky screenshot while Tim, in the segment where we were doing the quiz, he'd froze because his internet connection was rubbish. So I took a little cheeky screenshots and returned it into a little post so people could see, where everyone looks quite professional except me, where I've got a slightly mad look because I'm looking at the screen because I'm doing the screenshot, so I'm like actually doing something, whereas everyone else is casually looking around. And you've got your kind of podcast setups all very nice. You've got your Twitch streaming chair down and your headphones on, and I'm just in some wooden shed with a ironing board in the background that's got dogs on it. It's all very professional over in Oxford. Why wouldn't the Tabletop Tactics guys want this?
Well, I guess they'll tell you why after the application process, mate. But
I'm sure I will.
I would imagine top of the list would be the whole unwilling to relocate conversation that we established from the outset. What was I going to say? There was something else I was going to say, but it left my brain. Oh, yeah. Did you like what I did to Tim's voice to make up for the fact that he wasn't there at the start?
Yes, no, it was very funny, actually. I thought it was quite good.
That was one of those, 11 p.m. last-minute editing jobs where I was like, oh, God, I've got to get this done to upload it for tomorrow. What am I going to do to fix Tim? I was like, I can't get rid of the entire quiz segment because that would be crazy. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll just have to replace him with the voice of that teacher from Snoopy. So, yeah, there we go. So if anyone didn't listen to the end of the podcast where I explained that, but yet heard that. Anyway, it's a whole thing. We dealt with it. I hope you enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you very much, Brob the Heart One, or however we're supposed to pronounce it. It's incredible that you believe us to be the greatest 40k podcast out there, and obviously we appreciate that, as we appreciate everyone who leaves us a 5-star review. And if you would like to do the same, please do so. Leave us a review wherever you are able to do so, that being Facebook, Apple Podcasts, as is often the case, but other podcast platforms have review functionality. However, I will say, please make us aware of those 5-star reviews if they are not on Apple Podcasts or Facebook, because we do not check every single platform all of the time. So yeah, just let us know and then we'll call you out in the future. We will never stop podcasting as long as there are 5-star reviews. When they all go, that's when we go, right, Phil?
That sounds like a fair deal in my book.
All right, cool. On the topic of going, let's get going. Beginning. Transitional noise. All right, all in this part of the podcast, as is advertised, we're going to talk about Armies of Renown. But what are Armies of Renown, Phil? I have never heard of them.
Oh, well, they're a new thing. They're basically specialist detachments from Vigilus, but a bit different.
I mean, they're nothing like specialist detachments from Vigilus.
No, well,
you have made a blunder.
Here's my case. Specialist detachments.
Right.
Basically, you had a select number of units that you could apply keywords to, and they got access to a relic or a warlord trait and some stratagems. With Armies of Renown, the only real difference is it applies to your whole army and not just a detachment, but you get access to warlord trait, a relic, and some stratagems.
Wow.
And there's also some restrictions on the types of units that can go into it.
There you go.
Like now they're detachments.
Well, no. See, you're wrong there, sir. Because
there's a fine difference.
All right.
So with the specialist detachments, you could have anything in that detachment, but only certain things gain the keyword. Whereas here is you can only have those units in your entire army.
There you go. Which is a pretty massive distinction between the two, right? Because should it have been that I wanted to take a Siegebreaker cohort? A Siegebreaker cohort was the Imperial Fist specialist detachment from
the Richie Special, as we like to call it.
The Richie Special. But should it be that I wanted to take a Richie, I would have, been able to have filled out my Richie with a number of different options, but had included within some dreadnoughts, some centurions, and they would have benefited from the Siegebreaker cohort rules, but I wasn't restricted in sprinkling those elements into my army. So in a way, the old Vigilus detachments didn't necessarily have any bite to them. There wasn't any cost for creating this thematic detachment or this thematic army.
There's no penalty to it, because even though it only applied to certain units, you could then just take another specialist detachment to get some other benefits for other units. So for the Guard, there were, I think, 3 or 4 different detachments. So in theory, you could take all of them if you wanted, if you had all the required units.
Exactly. And what was good about the specialist detachments is that you could simply add them to multiple detachments and they would make up an entire army. Whereas in this instance, the Armies of Renown, you may not take anything else. If you add anything else to your army that does not conform to the Armies of Renown restrictions, you are not able to take them as an Army of Renown. So if I wanted to add an Imperial agent to my Mechanicus cohort, I would no longer be able to take them as an Army of Renown because it strictly states that my army can only contain these elements. So if I wanted to add an Inquisitor, if I wanted to add an Assassin,
a building,
God, if I wanted to add a building. No one ever talks about the buildings anymore, do they?
I know. I'm waiting for the expansion that's going to come at some point where it's going to be all about buildings.
All about buildings, the Codex.
Well, check
out this.
You laugh. That's what we had. We had Strongpoint. That was the Buildings Codex.
We did. It wasn't called just Strongpoint, though, was it? It was called Strongpoint.
Assault. There
you go. I actually dug that. I was cleaning up my attic the other day, and I came across it with its fancy cover with the Howling Griffins on it. Oh, it's pretty. Yeah. But anyway, we digress. But yeah, and also one of the clear distinctions with the old vigilist detachments is those specialist detachments were supplied in return for command points. So you would spend 1 CP to give that squad, give that detachment that additional keyword. So it would cost you CP in addition to other things. Whereas this is really interesting because actually what it starts to do is reward you and give you flavor, give you interesting army constructs and builds, but they do bake in these restrictions, which, though it does create a bit of a strange dynamic in so much as you now as a player need to decide whether or not this is something that is going to, benefit you or something that you want to, explore and express in your collection, or whether or not these benefits are not worth it versus the broader flexibility. So I think it's really interesting. I think I applaud Games Workshop for doing this because I think in a way this satisfies the criteria. This, gives me more of the kind of flavor and the identity that I want in these kind of lists than what the vigilist attachments achieved, in my opinion. I don't know. What's your general vibe?
No, I completely agree with you there. I like that they've done it so it's not locked into a particular type of gameplay. They haven't gone, this is for Crusade or narrative gaming only. You can do it for match play. You can take them to tournaments if you want. You probably won't because you're penalized enough where most people, unless they're doing a particular build, will go, this isn't super competitive. But they're still all playable and they're all good fun, I reckon, to play with. So I like that they're just giving you another way of playing your army. You've got some penalties with it that are sort of just baked into the army list. It doesn't cost you CP to do. So I think it's all good. I like it.
So what we're going to do to kind of pad out this segment into a typical Lookout Sir style affair is we're going to talk through the free Armies of Renown that are present within the Book of Rust. And then we're going to take a page from the Book of Tabletop Titans and come up with some other Armies of Renown that we would like to, talk about, future aspirations that we think would be cool, and just generally give you a sort of flavor of the potential creative possibilities. But, where we are different from the good people of Tabletop Titans, in our sort of Lookout Sir way, is we'll probably labour the point a little bit more than our friends over there.
I mean,
not that they are our friends.
It's not to say that we're copying them. It's just more they beat us to the punch.
Is that what it is?
Well, because we were going to do that, obviously, anyway. That's
well, we were, but it's difficult to prove that, isn't it?
I know. It's a bit like how we did quizzes first, and then at the start of lockdown, everyone did 40k quizzes, and it's like, we did that first, but we can't prove it.
We can't. We sort of stepped away from the quiz, though, right? We kind of laid it there, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that others out there do things similar to ourselves, because ultimately we wouldn't want people just to listen to this and go, "Oh, I see what you've done there, guys. You're just ripping off Tabletop Titans." Yeah, we are, but
no, we're not. No, that's the point. Is we're not.
Oh, okay.
We're not. We're just doing something similar because we're talking about Armies of Renown, so it'd be a bit silly to not speculate on possible cool ideas for future Armies of Renown.
Simpsons did it, Phil. Simpsons did it.
That reference is lost on me.
Is it lost in you? Oh, yeah. Okay. It's a South Park episode where Butters, as Professor Chaos, is trying to commit a series of crimes, and his sidekick is reminding him or informing him that his ideas had already been done on The Simpsons.
Cool.
So when he's saying, I've got an idea, his little sidekick would go, Simpsons did it! And he's like, The Simpsons did everything! And it's like, well, yes, they have. So that's how it goes. Anyway, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we gave an unnecessary amount of acknowledgement to the people of Tabletop Titans and all of their ongoing efforts. And I'm sorry that I would even suggest that this wasn't 100% our original ideas. Correct. Thank you, Phil. Thank you for forgiving me. I assume you've forgiven me. You don't look like you've forgiven me.
I'm on the fence still. Maybe later.
That Tabletop Tactics application is becoming even more of a reality every moment.
That move to Bath, I'm thinking about it.
Exactly. I mean, she might have been a crazy person, but she's not that bad. My ex-girlfriend, I mean, that you were referring to earlier.
Yeah, I mean...
Not my ex-girlfriend, your ex-girlfriend.
Of Bath. I mean, I don't know where she lives now.
You've lost track. You've lost track. I bet she hasn't. I bet she, as soon as you enter it, her spider sense will tingle.
She will be summoned like a witch and just appear from nowhere.
That place a hex on you as you're entering the boundaries of Bath.
Exactly.
I would love to know more about this mystery. I could totally believe that your ex-girlfriend would be some kind of like cultish figure that would spend time mastering the arts of witchcraft. Yes. But that would be a massive tangent, and we no longer need those right now because we have plenty to be talking about in these Armies of Renown. So let's talk about the Mechanicus Defense Cohort and what they bring to the table. So the important thing to note from the outset is that there are restrictions and there are benefits, right? So ultimately, if you want to take a Mechanicus cohort, you need to abide by the restrictions, but in doing so, you unlock benefits. Now, another important thing to clarify, and there was a very interesting thing that they wrote in the opening section on this, is that you do not just get an Army of Renown by fulfilling the requirements of an Army of Renown. You have to specifically state that that is what you've done. Now, again, I think that is something that they've put in there purely for kind of like tournament shenanigans. It needs to be very clear in your army list that this is what you've done. But it's an interesting thing that they've thrown in there because to me, it would seem obvious that had I taken an army that meet the criteria of an Army of Renown, that I am clearly doing that. But I suppose it addresses the idea that if you turn up to a tabletop and your opponent has all of the components of an Army of Renown, but is not themselves identifying it as such, that at least means that they are not being penalized because they're turning up and then being told, hang on a second here, mate, you can't have, I don't know, the Metallica Forge World traits because you're clearly an Army of Renown. So it seems that that's there for that reason, or just general weird lawyery clarification that Games Workshop feel the need to do these days. What do you reckon, Phil?
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think of all of them. So, for example, the Death Guard one's probably the most one where you could just so happen to not have any vehicles, which is a restriction for Death Guard in your army. And then the person might not know. But it's a bit weird because normally when you submit an army list to an event, for example, it's going to have warlord traits and relics and psychic powers on there, which you will probably be drawing from the Armies of Renown if you're playing them as such. So I think it would be pretty obvious if you're playing it. But I think it's just for on the off chance that you just so happen to have an army that could fulfill that criteria, you basically need to be explicit with your opponent whether you're taking it or not. Although I think game-wise, it'll be pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think so too. I suppose it just removes some of the potential complexity or potential
ambiguity,
loopholes. Yeah, exactly, right? It just helps out a little bit. But anyway, the Mechanicus Defense Cohort, in order to take one of these, basically all units in your army...
Come on, Dan. You haven't given the thematic flavour. What is the Mechanicus Defense Cohort all about? Set the scene.
I don't know. I don't know, Phil. You're the one who read the book. You tell me.
Okay, because you haven't read it, have you?
I haven't read it. No, is this what the whole thing is?
No,
just
no.
set up
I
the
just,
fact
I
I've
just,
not
I just
read
thought,
it.
no. I just like you've got to set the scene for everyone so people know what.
All
it
right.
is.
Well, you read the flavor text. Come on, Phil. You take that bold black text and you read it.
Oh, I could read that bit out. Okay.
Yeah, that would do.
Possessed by the unrelenting spirit of Omnissiah in his most obdurate aspect, the zealous warriors of the defense cohort will fight to the last rather than give ground. It's basically the thematic element is the Mechanicum quite often in retreat in this book. So the servitors, the lackeys, the robots get basically left there to defend to the last man, let them die while everyone else can sort of retreat off. So basically the protocols are set for them to stand their ground, shoot everything that moves, and basically fight until they run out of ammo or die. An interesting fact. So you remember when we went through the Missions of Legend, we went through the book. The very first one is all about your armies fleeing, and you have these sort of sentry guns that do mortal wounds because they're shooting at anyone nearby. Those sentry guns are actually servitors. When you get around to reading the actual story bit, they end up being servitors rather than just random sentry guns, which I thought was
well, la-di-da, eh? Look at you knowing the words and things. But yeah, no, man, it sounds actually really interesting when you put it like that. It actually makes the whole thing seem quite thematic and
makes sense as to why it explains the army restriction, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense now. Leave the mostly servitor robot people behind, although you do still have other elements, right? Because you can still take like the electro priests and other things that aren't just Skitarii, basically. That's like the main restriction.
Yes, but the restriction is you can't take Skitarii, which is 90% of the Mechanicum book. Mechanicus. But yeah, so if you just look at the Adeptus Mechanicus range, you've got like Tech Priest, you got the guy that programs the Castellan robot, you got Castellan robots, you've got the Cataphron breachers and destroyers, servitors, and that's kind of it. But as you mentioned, the Electro Priests, I believe, are still Mechanicum as well. Mechanicus.
Yes.
So they don't benefit from this because they're not included, but you can still take them in your list because they're within the allocated restricted units. Gotcha.
But if you wanted to go purely thematic for this, you want to predominantly take the more robotic elements, the more sort of the more servitor-esque.
Servitors, yeah, because it's basically the breachers, the destroyers, the servitors, and the Castellan robots. So they get the special rule, which is extremist sentinel protocol. So they get all the bonuses. But you could still take, the Electro Priest if you want.
The Electro Priest, yeah. And then in terms of the HQ stuff, you still got to be taking some Tech Priests or a Dominus.
Dominus, yeah.
Interesting, right? I mean, again, interesting set of restrictions. I know a lot of people, and now ourselves, will state that in the early instances of Mechanicus, they came in two separate books, Skitarii and Mechanicus. So this, in a lot of ways, is a callback to the early years of this collection, where they were effectively two separate books. Interesting, fun, strange fact about Skitarii when they first came out. They didn't have any HQ choices. Weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit odd.
It was such a strange oversight back in the day where you were like, what? And then they were like, yeah, but they get their own sort of weird detachment of just all troops. It's like, okay, seems logical.
I guess the idea is that you would sort of just take them with your Mechanicus army, but you're right.
Well, they were, no, because Skitarii came out first.
Okay, yeah, it's weird.
There was no Mechanicus for ages. Like, the idea was, they weren't even like, it was very weird. I suppose the idea was you just ally them with whatever, but it was very strange early doors in terms of how they worked, because you used to make like a squad sergeant your warlord was the way it used to work.
You'd have to,
yeah. And I think famously their squad sergeants were amongst the first squad sergeants to have 2 wounds, which was a strange, weird little quirk about them. But anyway, yeah, so look, I mean, for all those people who've pointed that out, yeah, it is accurate. This is very similar to the original publication of the Mechanicus book from 6th/7th edition. I think it was the 7th edition book, but
could have been 6, because I think that's when Knights came out, and it would have been around about then.
Yes, Knights came out in 6th, but then I think these guys came 7th, because I think Scutari, then Mechanicus, and then they basically released they released a new Knights book, I think, even before they did Scutari, and then I think they just kind of mashed it all together into these 3 books makes a Mechanicus army.
Yeah.
Should you so wish to do so.
I remember this is very reminiscent of 7th edition Mechanicus anyway, just because Cataphren breaches and destroyers were so good. Pretty much that's all people took.
Pretty much, right? Pretty much. And I think that's the thing, because in terms of your benefits, all units in your army gain the Mechanicus Defense Cohort keyword. You have access to the Mechanicus Defense Cohort Warlord traits, relics, and stratagems, which we'll talk about in a moment. Cataphren breaches, Cataphren destroyers, servitors, and Castellan robot units in your army gain the Extremis Sentinel Protocols ability described below. What is that ability, Phil?
Well, there are several bullet points. I'll go through them one at a time. So the first one is, this unit never gains a Forge World dogma, see Codex Adeptus Mechanicus, but its inclusion in a detachment does not prevent other units in that detachment, excluding other units with this ability, from gaining a dogma. So I presume that is specifically referring to things like the Tech Priests or the Electro Priests.
And the Dominus as well, right?
Yes.
He's not specifically on there. So your Dominus will still get a dogma, which is good though, right? Because you can still add a bit of the Forge World flavor into the into the list in places.
Yeah, but already you've got another sort of negative trade-off with taking this. But in addition to that, you gain the Extremis Sentinel keyword, which now unlocks lots of fun things for you, predominantly the Warlord traits, relics, and stratagems. But you also get the following abilities. Each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model in this unit, if a unit is either wholly within its controller's deployment zone, or if every model in this unit is within range of an objective marker, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack to a minimum of 1.
So I've heard the competitive guys talk about this and say that it's not that great because you don't want to be in your deployment zone, because obviously within the context of a ITC game, your deployment zone will typically have so much terrain within it, and the battlefield will be so densely covered in terrain that it will be impossible for you to be able to use this ability while you remain in your deployment zone, because you just won't be able to shoot.
Well, this is the thing I teased, I think, last week when I said there was an ability in this book that basically implies the rules writer's intent that you should be able to shoot from one deployment zone to the next. And this is it, because if you can be shot at in your deployment zone to use this ability, it's got to be prevalent enough that it requires this ability. If you can't be shot by your opponent while you're in your deployment zone, it'd be pointless to have this. So,
I mean, you could be shot at by your opponent in subsequent turns while you're in the deployment zone. It doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to happen in turn 1, but a lot of the competitive scene will look down on this as an ability because it doesn't benefit the intrinsic gameplay of an ITC 9th edition game, which is we all hang out in the middle and grind it out. So
it fits the thematic element of you sort of holding your ground though, and it's like you're meant to be standing still just shooting stuff. So if you were to play this in potentially some more narrative games where you're a defender, this might be much more powerful than it would appear in a generic match play game.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, when you consider that so many of these units are, full of wounds, I think the destroyers are coming in at 3 wounds a piece, something like that. And then the robots are about 4 or 5.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, that would be my guess too. I apologize for not researching that. But they've got enough wounds that this is meaningful. So, yeah. No, I like it. I think it's a good ability.
Yeah.
What else?
I was going to say, the fact that it also works when you're within range of an objective marker does give them some legs in terms of playing a normal game when you're trying to get those middle ground objectives as well.
I was about to say, I forgot that there was a second element to it. Yeah. So, but the interesting caveat of that is that every model in the unit has to be within range of the objective, right?
If every model in this unit is within range of an objective marker, yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So it obviously discourages you from taking big units because you obviously don't want, a massive 12-man unit of destroyers because it would be very difficult to get those large bases all around an objective. But obviously, if you're taking smaller 3-man units, it becomes a lot more viable to explore that, which I think is fine because I think there's a lot to be said for small optimized units like that. So little 3-man units of robots, little 3-man units of destroyers or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
I agree. That's interesting for sure. What else does this do, Phil?
Yeah, the next one is each time an enemy unit declares a charge against this unit, if this unit is not within engagement range of any enemy units, it can either hold steady or set to defend. So I guess you're saving yourself a CP because normally it costs you a command point to do that.
Yeah, so it basically means that you're effectively treated yourself as being in cover when you're not.
Yeah.
Which is pretty valuable in a lot of respects. And obviously, should it be that you are looking to Overwatch, then yeah, being able to hit on 5s is no bad thing.
Yeah, not too bad. Especially when you go also shooty robots.
Indeed.
Yeah. It then clarifies that. So it said if it holds steady, then until the end of the phase, any Overwatch attacks made by the models in this unit score hits on unmodified rolls of 5+ instead of 6+.
Yeah, so that's just the rule for hold steady. So that's how it appears in the rule book. So I guess they're just putting it there for additional clarification for some reason.
And then the next one is if it sets to defend, then until the end of a phase, it cannot fire Overwatch. But until the next fight phase, each time a model in this unit makes an attack roll, you get +1 to your hit roll. Yeah, so it's just clarifying what those are.
It's interesting, actually, you raised the point about if you set to defend, you can't fire Overwatch, because I've had a couple of games where I have interpreted that wrongly. I think I've shot Overwatch, or my opponents have shot Overwatch and then gone into a defensive position. So I might need to go back and triple check that, because it seems like you can't have your cake and eat it in that instance.
I always assumed it was you do one or the other. Yeah.
I didn't realize it was. Well, I thought if you paid the CP, you Overwatched, and then you had the choice of boosting it to a 5+ or getting the +1 to hit. But
maybe it is that actually.
Yeah. Anyway, irrespective, it's interesting. Probably one of the best things about this is its warlord trait, though. I think this is a really strong warlord trait, and that is every unit that is within 6 of this warlord has the objective secure ability, and if they already have the objective secure ability, you add 1 additional model when determining control of an objective marker. So that's big. Having the ability.
What's that warlord trait called then?
It is called Cacophonious leadership.
Cacophonous.
Is it cacophonious? There you go. That makes so much more sense than caco.
I mean, that does sound.
That's my dyslexia getting the better of me there, Phil. You know, I'm no good with the words.
I know it'd be really mean to put you on the spot on that, wouldn't it?
I know. Why do I do a podcast where I read books, considering that I am completely illiterate?
I mean, it has to be said that Games Workshop is fantastic for creating the most wordy, hard to pronounce words in the wordy words book of the world.
That's it. Yeah. And what's funny about that, Phil, is you've just told me how it is supposed to be pronounced, or at least your interpretation of that. I've already forgot. I can't help but look at it and go, cacophonous. It's just nothing about it makes sense.
No, exactly. It's crazy.
Exactly.
It's cool.
It's not a word. Oh, it's a super strong ability. It might have a terrible name, but it's got a sweet ability, which is nice. Look, I mean, having OBSEC on those big scary robots is massively strong. The idea that you can have loads and loads and loads of the 3 units of those robots.
If I remember rightly, the Cataphrone breaches and destroyers are troops anyway, so they should have objective secured. So they're now doubling that, so each model's counts as 2. But then the Castellan robots get the objective secured because they wouldn't have it by default.
Yeah, Yeah, and it massively optimizes those smaller 3-man units, right? Because then all of a sudden those 3-man units become 6-man units for the purposes of scoring objectives. And that's big because a lot of people are still running smaller 5-man units. So being one more than them is obviously a winner in that regard. And obviously, the big robot skating as well is cool. The relic isn't much to get excited about. It's just a special gun. Do you want to talk about it at all? The Forge Fire?
Forge Fire. So it's a Volkite blaster, replaces a Volkite blaster. It's range 36, heavy 3, strength 6, -2, 2 damage. And then each time an attack is made, an unmodified hit roll of 6 does 1 mortal wounds, which is what a normal Volkite does. I believe it's just extra strength and maybe an extra damage and extra AP because Volkite is normally AP dash, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the AP that's special about it. Although, again, what's always interesting about this is we're in that weird period at the moment where Mechanicus hasn't come out yet, so we don't know what a standard Volkite is supposed to look like because we know the Mechanicus book is coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, you'd assume because it's just called Volkite, it would be the same as the Space Marine Volkite, but they do have a habit of prefixing every type of weapon. You know, like you've got Iron Hell, Heavy Stubber, you've got Heavy Stubber, you've got...
Yeah, it's been established multiple times that the Mechanicus tend to keep the best version for themselves, right? So when it comes to something like the Volkite, it wouldn't surprise me if the Mechanicus version of Volkite is superior to the Marine version simply because of the fact that they like to keep this stuff to themselves. But then the Mechanicus are pretty in there with the Primaris side of Marines, so maybe they do actually have level pegging on this side of things. But either way, it's I mean, it is clearly better than a regular Volkite, but how that compares to what they will become in a few weeks' time, who knows? But intriguing. I mean, stratagem-wise, they've got some interesting ones, though, right? I mean, I think in terms of these abilities, bolster defenses sounds quite interesting. The idea that you can essentially take a terrain feature in your deployment zone and boost its defensive properties is really interesting. So essentially, you pick a terrain feature and you give it the light cover ability, and if it already has the light cover ability, it then boosts your armor save by 2 rather than 1. So if you have a 4-up save and you are inside of this building, you will now have a 2-up save, which is pretty crazy. But obviously if you have a 3-up, it goes to 1, so on and so forth. So yeah,
really good.
I mean, and definitely again continues to showcase that thematic aspect of the army. It showcases the idea of these guys hunkering down and getting ready to fight to the last, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. You've also got Citation of Ruin, which is pretty cool. It basically gives your extremist sentinel units the ability to shoot in combat as if they're a vehicle. So it gives them the big guns never tire rule. You also don't suffer the -1 to shoot when you're in combat.
Is the big guns never tire rule also the one that means that you ignore moving and shooting penalties? Oh, no, it's not, is it? That's just an infantry specific thing with the minus to hit. Because a lot of this stuff is probably not suffering that penalty anyway, I would assume.
Well, I think none. I don't think these are. I don't think they're classed as vehicles, so they won't be able to move and shoot without the penalty of -1 to hit for heavy weapons. Although I suspect a lot of them are assault weapons.
No, I think a lot of them are heavy weapons, but I think they have abilities baked in that stop that. Or if they don't, then they've they probably, maybe that contributes to it in some way. But even then, it's pretty good again, because the idea is that you're standing there and you're just going to keep shooting. So if someone charges into you, you're just going to keep shooting them, right? Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because I think with the Castellan robots, quite often, I mean, they're pretty deadly to punch to death anyway. So you don't really want to be in combat with them, but at least that would tie up their shooting ability, which I think is more devastating. So if you've got a reasonably durable unit, you could be like, tag them in, locks down the whole unit, they can't shoot now, because otherwise they've got to fall back. But now you can shout, I'll just shoot you instead, and then punch you, because I can then still do that in the combat phase.
That is true. That's true. You can make some deceptively punchy breaches and things. They get like some kind of weird like power fist drill weapon.
The breaches of a closer range ones that are a bit more close combat orientated. And then the destroyers are obviously a bit more shooty. You've also got the pre-calibrated purge solution, which sounds lovely. And this essentially is +1 to hit when you're firing, but when you are within your deployment zone. So again, more abilities that benefit you standing still and shooting a lot, which isn't going to win you a ITC game of 40k anytime soon, but certainly makes for an interesting army in the general sense. Because they also explicitly say you also... If you're in your deployment zone and you're shooting at your opponent who's in their deployment zone, you get +1 to hit. So this is the other rule where it's like, Games Workshop expects you to be able to do that. It literally says it in these rules.
Yeah, but come on now. What does Games Workshop actually know about the real rules of the game? Come on now. Yeah. Don't you start being all like, hang on, guys, we're doing it wrong. You're a fool, Phil. A fool.
No.
How dare you expect to have an army with the ability to shoot actually be able to do something? You silly boy.
There's a lot of good synergy with all of these, and as you said, it fits theme. The last one is Rab Bombardment, which is a bit like any kind of orbital bombardment strike, if I'm not mistaken.
Any modern orbital bombardment strike, not different from the old ones, because the old ones it used to just go off simultaneously, whereas this one is a place a marker and it happens later, right?
Yeah, so you place a marker, it goes off in your following command phase. You roll a d6 for all units within 6 inches of the center of that marker, subtracting 1 if it's a character. So that's all pretty standard so far. Normally it's on like a 2+, you do mortal wounds. On a 6 it's d6. This is slightly different. On a 4 to 5 that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, and on a 6+ that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, and until the end of the turn subtract 1 from the toughness characteristic of each model in that unit. It's not cumulative with other effects that reduce the toughness of the characteristic, which a lot of the Mechanicus Skitarii do have, like small range auras. And then the marker is removed at the end and you can only use this stratagem once. So it's not as accurate in terms of doing mortal wounds because it goes off on a lower amount. But if you get that juicy 6+, you're knocking down their toughness for the whole game, which is pretty cool.
Amazing, yeah. No, I like it. I think it's pretty strong. I think it's sort of a very...
it's until the end of that turn.
Yeah, but still, again, I think it's an interesting Mechanicus-flavoured stratagem, and also very useful for baiting people or, kiting people out of their strongholds and bringing, your guns to bear, which is good, which I think is really important. I like it. I think, again... I would struggle to want to play this list myself, but I like what they've achieved with it. And knowing from yourself a bit more of the kind of narrative flavor that establishes this force, I think it's actually quite interesting. Again, not one I would play personally, but certainly an interesting option.
Yeah, I think because I've always wanted to collect Mechanicus. And if I was to do it, I would probably start off by theming it along this lines, because I've always loved the Catron Breaches and Destroyers, and I've always sort of loved the Kassan robots, because I think initially I was like, oh, they're a bit silly, but now they've grown on me. So I kind of like those. I think they're some of the better units. There's a lot of the kind of weird, wibbly Skitarii stuff I'm not hugely fond of. I do like... some of them though, and I can't remember what they're called. They're the ones, the Forge World upgrade, because they're basically the Titan guys that basically run around protecting the legs of the Titans. So I've always liked that as a force, like basically my army's there protecting Knights and Titans, and that's their job. But I've always just liked all the robots and servitor stuff as well. So I'd probably go down that route personally if that's what I was going to collect.
You wrote quite a fabulous piece of fan fiction for your army. You did like a color scheme. It was all you would talk about for like a month, and then it never happened.
No, I know. It's because I think I was starting to collect knights, and I wrote a bit of lore behind my knights, and then I was like, well, obviously knights need to be allied to either Imperium or Admech. It's like, I'll do Admech, and then I could one day do an Admech army or have a Reaver Titan or something crazy. So I've done a load of lore background for all of that. But one unit I have created was the Daughters of the Cog, which was my it was like Sisters of Silence conversion with the Admech heads, which I run in game generally with my Inquisitor now for my Astra Militarum army. So I run them as Crusaders because they've got like little shields and stuff. So they're my one unit from that whole army concept that I've actually built and painted up.
One day we'll see it become reality. I always liked the idea, Phil, and you will have heard me say this many times, but I always loved the idea of you using like a giant knight in your Krieg army, but obviously having it with really, really muddy, dark feet to fit your overarching color scheme. But then from like the knees upwards, it would be this really bright, vibrant color, just to kind of completely contrast against your grim.
The rest of the army. Yeah, well, my plan's always been the same. So even with my Minotaur army, I'm basing them in the same style and rim color as my Krieg, and the knights that I was going to do would be exactly the same. So altogether, if I did run them as one big army, they'd all look unified. And yeah, with the knights, they would be, I want to do red and black color scheme for them. And then muddy feet, but then a bit cleaner going up the top.
There you go. Not bright yellow, eh?
No, that'd be madness.
On the topic of madness and bright coloured things, the free blade lance. There it is. Words. Phil, why don't you tell us about the lore that personifies the free blade lance? Why is this a thing?
Yeah, so it says the little flavour text: outcasts fighting together for glory, redemption or revenge. The nobles of the free blade lance help one another bear the burden of their exile as they pilot their knights into furious battle. So the one that's
Avengers Assemble, right?
Basically, so you've got the Forgotten Company, which is the one that's mentioned in the rules, but they also talk about the Void Striders and the Unfettered. So basically what happens is a couple will band together and they become known and famous, so other free blades seek them out. It's like the Seven Samurai teaming up together to form a super group, as you said, like the Avengers. And basically the benefit of that for them is obviously every free blade has their own strengths and weaknesses, so they can kind of cover each other's backs and make up for it, so they're stronger together as one unified whole, as opposed to individually fighting. So that's the concept of a free blade lance, basically.
I really love it. I think for me it's one of the most interesting concepts that adds a lot of added flavor to the knights. I think I always really loved the concept of the free blade. I thought it was one of the most interesting parts of the Knight Codex. The problem was it was always difficult in gaming terms to bring that to life on the tabletop in a way that wasn't, underwhelming, I suppose. But the idea now that you can build a list that in many ways negates a lot of the negative attributes of taking a free blade knight, but you can kind of express all of the kind of individuality. You can express so much more of the flavor of these knights and their own individual heraldry and their own individual identities on the tabletop, but bring it together as a cohesive force. It definitely has that kind of old sort of Power Rangers-esque vibe of the multicolored force of warriors that comes together to face off against evil and so on. I like it as a
as a painting challenge to create an army. That's fantastic. It's like you paint up 3-4 big knights. Everyone is a different color scheme with its own heraldry. You could go properly to town on it. I think that'd be really fun. So I think it's a good challenge. The interesting one about these, and it's something we haven't talked about yet, is obviously all of these Armies of Renown, well, with the exception of the last one, are all pre-codex. So their new 9th edition codex hasn't come out yet. And it's hard to tell from this whether the intention is that this is really meant to sit alongside the new codex that's coming out, or if it's sort of designed to bolster the existing codex, or if it's meant to sort of do both. Because the downside of the free blades before is just the rules were really awful and the benefits weren't that good. They didn't really outweigh the cost of the fact that you've got to take a burden along with your kind of boost. but also you lose any kind of house traits, and the house traits were fantastic. All the houses have like relics, stratagems, warlord traits. I don't think Free Blades really got anything on that level.
Until now, yeah.
So you would never take them. So it'll be interesting to see how this will fit in with the new codex going forwards, to see how good Free Blades become in that book, versus sort of interpreting how they are now when Free Blades just aren't that good.
Yeah, I think this is Canis Rex's time to shine, because he obviously is a Free Blade, and he is a model, a rule set that's so rarely seen on the tabletop, because as a Free Blade, he obviously isn't up to the same standards as your standard knightly households. But yeah, the idea that you could now look at Canis Rex and then throw in 3 or 4 additional knights, I think that could be actually really exciting. And Canis has a number of really interesting abilities as a Free Blade that can really, come into.
He's also got a cool model for him as the princeps. Yeah. It's funny. I don't think I've ever seen the knight on the tabletop, but I've seen online plenty of people paint up the little pilot.
I think Richie's ran. No, he just runs the Knight Perceptor. He doesn't actually run the Canis Rex variant of it. But anyway, either way, there was some interesting synergies there for sure. And look, I mean, in terms of the restriction, the entire army can only contain Free Blade Lance, or just Free Blades, essentially. So all units in your army must be Free Blades. When determining which qualities and burdens each Free Blade Lance model in your army has, they cannot have a quality or a burden that another Free Blade Lance model in your army has until all other qualities and burdens have been selected, unless randomly generated. Which already I love, because I love the idea now that they have essentially spelled out to me, you just have to randomly generate this. And I think
you don't have to. It says all, unless they're randomly generated, so you could pick them.
You're going to randomly generate all the time because it's fun to be like, throw some randomly generated stuff at it. It depends how that needs to be interpreted in a tournament structure. Do I randomly generate at the start of the tournament and then I lock it in for all future things? Or is the expectation that I have to choose for tournament play? I think it is, if you're going into tournament play, you have to have it on the list, right? So you're just going to have to...
Yeah, so it sort of makes sense. I think you'd want to choose anyway, just because that's where you can create the combos, because quite often you can have like +1 attack, but -1 to hit with ranged weapons, but you go, cool, I'll take that on my Gallant, because it has no ranged weapons. That's a perfect combo. Great, tick that one.
There's some really funny burdens as well. Like there's one which, as a burden, you just have to run towards the nearest enemy, which you always like put on Gallants because you're just like, that's what I was going to do anyway.
So thematically correct.
Yeah. So there's some interesting elements for sure. And in terms of your benefits, in terms of the things that you do gain, so all units in your army gain the Free Blade Lance keyword. You have access to Free Blade Lance warlord traits, relics, and stratagems, which we'll talk about in a moment. Every Free Blade Lance is such a weirdly tongue-twisty word to say. A model in your army can have qualities and burdens rather than just one Free Blade per detachment. So the whole army now gains access to qualities and burdens as opposed to just the one, which is, quite a good thing. And Free Blade Lance character models in your army gain legendary Knight ability. What is that ability, Phil?
So you get to add 1 to your leadership characteristic of this model. Now you might go, well, that's rubbish, adding 1 to your leadership, but the qualities and burdens rely on you passing your leadership test every turn, if I remember correctly. Otherwise, you suffer.
And it's an old school leadership test. It's an old school.
Oh, as in on 2d6. Right.
Correct, yeah. So you have to roll under or equal to your leadership on 2d6.
Yeah.
So +1 to that is massive.
Yeah, unless you've sort of gamed your burdens to not be very hampering to your army build, like we were saying before. But on the whole, there's always going to be 1 or 2 that might really swing the game in your opponent's favor if you're stuck with that burden for a turn. So having that's great. You also get another ability. So when giving qualities and burdens to this model, you can use a following method instead of one presented in the codex. So you can select 2 qualities from the table and select 1 burden. I think normally you have to select 1 quality and 1 burden. if I'm not mistaken. So the fact that you can just take 2 and only 1 burden, that's fantastic. It says the same as before, that you basically can't have duplicate qualities and burdens until you've got all the qualities and burdens, and then you can sort of go around a second time. The thing to note is that obviously this affects characters, but obviously there is a stratagem that allows you to give nice character keywords. I presume you can do this multiple times.
Now, so you're talking about the what is it called now when it happens? You've got your court of something or other. Basically the exalted court.
Yeah, exalted court. Yeah.
Which I believe may have not been an option to the free blades before. I think that's linked to a normal knightly household as opposed to being generic. But perhaps it's something that can be added to free blade characters as well. I see you there, Phil, typing away on your phone, rapidly looking for the reference on. Are you on the Warhammer app, or are you just looking up on the internet?
I'm on the Games Workshop affiliated Warhammer app. So it is an Imperial Knight stratagem, 1 to 3 CP. Use this stratagem before the battle. After you have chosen your warlord, choose a Questoris class or Dominus class model. Each model you choose gains a character keyword, and you can choose an Imperial Knight warlord trait for them as well. There's no limitations on whether it's in a house or a free blade, so you should be able to do that. You can obviously only use a stratagem once per battle row.
Sounds good though, right? I mean, why wouldn't all of your free blades have their own unique character, eh?
Yeah. So it says if you choose, you can choose 1 Questoris class or Dominus class model from your army for 1 CP, or 2 models for 3 CP. So you can use it only once, but it can affect up to 2 models.
Yeah. So you can have 3 characters all told.
Yeah. Why is that? Because your warlord naturally becomes a character as well, in addition to these 2?
So your warlord would naturally become a character. Where that gets interesting, though, I suppose, is in terms of the warlord traits that you would give, but you could obviously use the generic warlord traits rather than the knightly household warlord traits. But you could also use the echoes from the past warlord trait, which is the free blade lance warlord trait, which is essentially you gain access to a warlord trait, or rather, sorry, you gain access to a household ability. So your character may have heralded from House Tyrannus in a previous life, and by gaining access to the echoes from the past warlord trait, you now have the ability of House Tyrannus, which is that every time you take a wound, you can ignore it on a 6, for example.
That's super cool.
Which is
I really like the theming of it. But you got to note, you don't gain a keyword or anything, so you don't suddenly unlock access to their relics and stratagems or anything. It's literally just the house ability.
Yeah, but still really, really good. Again, raises the question, is it that good when I can get that plus other warlord traits under normal circumstances? To which, obviously, the answer is, oh, yeah, about that. But, look, I mean, I don't think anyone's necessarily going to say that the Free Blades army list is as optimal as a standard knight list, but it's certainly a fun idea and an interesting option. In terms of their relics, they have the Bringer of Justice. What does the Bringer of Justice offer you, Phil?
So it is a Reaper chainsword only, because that's what it is, and then you swap it out. So Bringer of Justice, it's got 2 profile options. So you've got the strike and sweep. The strike melee, as obviously named by the fact it's a chainsword, ×2 strength, -4, 6 damage. Pretty tough.
Which is exactly what it is normally. But sweep is a new thing.
Yeah, so sweep is strength user, AP -3, 2 damage, and the ability is that each time you make an attack with the sweep profile, make 2 hits instead of 1.
Which essentially means a Knight Gallant would go up to having 10 attacks.
That's pretty good when you're chopping at Space Marines, for example. I guess because when you attack with your feet, you get, isn't it 3 attacks for every 1?
You do get 3 attacks, yeah.
And that's,
but the thing is,
that's only D3 damage, though.
Yeah, that is D3 damage rather than the guaranteed 2, plus it's AP -2 rather than AP -3. It's D3 damage and 3 attacks. So the feet in general are probably going to still be as good an option as any.
Assuming they stay that way, though, because that's the other thing. You've got to look at this in context of you don't know how the rest of these data sheets are going to update.
Exactly. But even then, I think, it's an interesting weapon. I don't think I would look past the more generic things. The Paragon Gauntlet is always going to be a better choice than the Bringer of Justice, because that flat 8 damage is too good.
Well, it's too good. It might not be in the new codex.
Well, again, but as it stands at the moment, you're going to take that Paragon Gauntlet, aren't you? You're not gonna go Bringer of Justice. Although, Phil, just so you know, it's possible that you could do both. I believe, because I do believe there is a favored knight. Here you go. Use this stratagem before the battle. When you are mustering your army, select one free-blade lance character model from your army that has one heirloom of the noble household relic. That model can select a second heirloom of the noble household relic. This must be a relic they could have. Each relic in your army must be unique. You can only use this stratagem once. So you could have both.
So cool. Like 2CP, totally worth it. I sort of wish every army had this ability, because I like the idea of comboing up relics to make really flavorful characters, and not even really considering like, I just want to make a broken combo. No, I just think you can just make some cool things. It's like, I want my Space Marine captain to have like the armor of Artifice, whatever it's called, but also a really cool sword. Why wouldn't he?
You can do that though with your Space Marine characters. There is a Space Marine stratagem that allows you to take an additional relic. I think it's even a Warlord trait. Actually, it's a Warlord trait that unlocks an additional relic
onto the same character.
Onto the same character, but it has to be one of the. It's not a relic; it's a specialist war gear item.
Oh, right.
But maybe that's just a Death Watch thing, or I can't remember now. My reference points for Space Marines is so Death Watch centric.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think there was a generic one, but I could be wrong because I'm still working my way through that one in terms of remembering what all those stratagems are. A bit like,
oh mate, yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I've freely acknowledged that what I just said could be entirely wrong. So, Lord only knows what's going on.
I'd say this on a night. Oh my god, this is so cool! Like you would totally do this.
Yeah, and again, an incredible way of expressing the kind of character of a free blade and bringing it to life in that way. Brothers and Sisters in Burden is really interested in because it's essentially a 6-inch aura ability that means that you don't have to test for burdens, which is again incredibly strong. The ability to essentially negate that whole sequence of events for 1 CP is only a good thing. So I like that as well. I think that really plays into the character of the army. Any other stratagems you want to call out? I appreciate there's only 4. I don't know if we just do
let's just do more. There's an interesting one that I really like the look of, and it's interesting for a few different reasons. One of them is Strength from Exile. So the idea is you're used to being on your own, so it rewards that in terms of play. So use a stratagem in your shooting phase when you're going to shoot, or in the fight phase when you're going to fight. Until the end of that phase, while that model is more than 12 inches away from any friendly models, each time it makes an attack roll, re-roll a hit roll of 1 and a wound roll of 1. So you get rerolls of 1 and to wound down to hits. Very cool. If this model is an Acastus class or Dominus class, it costs you 2 CP. Otherwise, it costs you 1. Now, there's something extra special about this, I believe. Do you know what it is?
Please tell me, Phil. I do not know.
So, nerdy reference ahoy. So the Acastus class is the Forge World specific super large ones. So the ones with the double twin cannons on either side and the weird sort of derpy skull face and the 2 big super
that's
cannons.
One of its best qualities.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of those models, but this is interesting because this is the first time a GW publication has written a rule specifically to acknowledge Forge World models.
Is this you going back to when you were showing those screen grabs of the GW website with Forge World listings on them?
No, it's not even that. It's just I'm.
Is it coming full circle, Phil? It's all happening.
Well, what I'm pleased is that because the problem with the Forge World book before was always like it's cool, but stratagems just don't synergize with them because they've used different keywords and they deliberately word them in a different way. So in 8th edition, very few of the standard stratagems worked on Forge World models. But here it's nice to know that they're actually acknowledging them, they're rolling them into the book, they're sort of integrating the Forge World models with the Games Workshop line. So I think this is super positive.
Yeah, I can only agree, mate. And I think that's obviously, an aspect of the fact that Games Workshop's rules writing team are now responsible for those Forge World rules. So they're not neglecting to remember that they have hugely successful product lines within Forge World, especially within the Imperial Knight range, right? Like those Forge World Imperial Knights do very good business. So yeah, you definitely need to integrate those where possible. I'm always tempted by that dude with the flamer and the chainsword fists.
Oh yeah, he's a cool one.
He's such a cool model. It's so difficult not to just buy it. The more I talk about it, the more likely I feel like it might just happen, but I'm not going to do it. I will resist.
Yeah,
I need to finish this.
I've always wanted the more Mechanicum themed ones with the siege claws.
Claw hand.
Yeah, and the sort of battle cannon lightning claw. Lightning cannon.
I liked those ones. The only issue I had with them was that they were so, they just felt like upgrades to the existing Knight kit, whereas
because that's what they are.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas the Cerastus one and the
Lancers are all completely unique, aren't they?
Yeah, which again with those double jointed like legs and stuff they got, and they're just awesome. The last one is Deeds of Legends. Phil, do you want to take us home with Deeds of Legends?
So use this stratagem in any phase. When a freelance model from your army destroys an enemy vehicle, monster, or character, that model gains one quality of your choice for the rest of the battle. It does not gain any burdens. This must be a quality that the model doesn't already have and cannot be a quality that another Freeblade Lance model in your army already has, unless all other qualities have already been selected. If you select an indomitable quality and that model has lost any wounds, it regains one lost wound. You can only use this stratagem once, and it costs 1 CP. Now, I don't know what the indomitable quality is. I assume it's a better
you regain
version.
Wounds ability.
Oh, is that all?
No, the indomitable quality is the specific quality, which is a regains wounds.
Okay, that makes more sense. So the fact that you also just gain a wound straight off the bat is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, the prerequisite, I believe, of like the indomitable thing is I can't remember the specifics of it, but I think it's every turn you gain a wound. So I guess the idea is that then comes into effect immediately and then happens in subsequent turns. But I like it. It reminds me of the old Boon of Mutation table for the Chaos Space Marines, the Champions of Chaos system, where you would issue a challenge because you had to issue challenges with Chaos Space Marines. And then if your champion won in combat, it would gain a boon from the Chaos Gods, and then you would add extra stats. So by the end of the game, if your squad sergeant or Chaos Lord had successfully slayed multiple characters in combat or multiple things in combat, it gained a series of added abilities that increased its ability. Or you could use the Boon of Mutation psychic power, which would make you roll on it as well. But yeah, there were lots of really cool, interesting ways that you could add, unique flavor to your characters in every game. So I like that. I think, again, that kind of stuff is really cool.
See,
really
I thought you were going to talk about the Space Wolves, where you have the heroic deeds that you've got to accomplish, and then once you do that, you gain a bonus.
Yeah, but where this is different is that you can theoretically randomly generate it. Admittedly, it's much less deep than the old Chaos Gifts of Mutation or Boon of... Well, I can't remember what it's called. The Champion table that they used in the old Chaos Space Marine book. But yeah, it's just cool. It's cool to be able to add something. And it's also cool to think that I can then add a trait that would potentially, give me an advantage in that specific matchup. So the idea that I could be like, oh, there's a lot of vehicles, I need this trait, or there's a lot of, things coming in, I need this one. So there is a potential there as a player to be able to do the smallest amount of list tailoring, even though it only affects one character, even though it's once per game. fair enough, but it's still cool.
I always like abilities that are kind of mid-game bonuses for doing something, like the Demon Carrion used to have, and I don't know if it still does actually. Like you destroy units, or kill a character, you gain an invuln save, for example, because you've just eaten the person. And what was it? The other Forge World Tyranid model, sort of the floaty one. If you destroyed a model in combat, you got like, it was almost like you got preferred enemy or something against your whole, or again against that unit type for the rest of your army, because you've effectively sucked their brains out, and now you know how to defeat them.
The brain bug has gone to them, and now it's now it's game on. No, I love it. I think, again, genuinely, for me, the Free Blades are probably the most interesting Army of Renown in this. I can't pretend that I think they are competitive or strong, but they're interesting, and I like interesting. Interesting is, as the name implies, interesting. So for me, yeah, I think of all three of these, that's the one I would most likely experiment with and take. Admittedly, my Knight collection is a uniform single color scheme, so it wouldn't necessarily work if I wanted to continue to use it long term, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem particularly difficult to experiment with.
Here's the thing, though. So the concept of that the Free Blade Lance is that they do form into companies. So, like the Forgotten Company is the one that they mention. So, like, you could justifiably say they do have their own unique color scheme that they all adopt, because the whole point is they are like surrogate houses, which is sort of what they sort of seek out, and why you get Free Blades joining them. So, some with each Knight has its own kind of unique heraldry on it, and maybe you lean into that, but I've still got a consistent color scheme. I guess people might go, oh, you've just painted House Raven and they've got the House Raven transfers on them, they're not really free blades, are they? They would have a point.
They would do in that instance. I mean, I would be amazed if anyone could tell me what the House Raven color scheme is, because I sure don't know. But
white and blue, I don't. Do you know what? I don't know myself.
Exactly. No one knows. No one knows. This is the age-old conversation. No one knows unless it's Space Marines. Like, they're the only people that suffer with that.
True.
Anyway,
well, actually, I do know what House Raven is. It's red and black with hazard stripes, because it's on the very next page.
Yeah, it is. It is. It
it's
is
a classic scheme.
But that's the thing. Had you not looked at that, you wouldn't know.
True. I think I was thinking white and blue, but that's the famous House Gryffindor one.
Gryffindor?
Griffin.
There we go. Gryffindor are orange and red, aren't they?
No, I don't know.
No, I don't know either. Anyway, moving on. So the last of the armies of renown found within the pages of the Book of Rust is the Terminus Est Assault Force. What do you think the Est is in favour of, Phil?
No. Now, yeah, I think it's just its name. What it means.
Terminus Est.
I don't know. The end.
What should it be? Should it be pronounced EST?
No, I think it's Est.
No, it's just Est. Not established. Not estimated. Who knows?
Like HMS. It's
HMS.
Yeah.
But that's HMS, not HMS.
I know. Maybe it is EST then.
Who could say? I mean, someone knows. Clearly, we're not them. But nonetheless, this is the Typhus detachment, which, it's fair to say, is a more chunky Army of Renown. 4 whole pages, Phil.
You are treated to a lot more. You get psychic powers. You get a whole page of relics, not just, one.
It's almost like, Phil, they had the idea for this and they put that in this book, and then they went, it sort of feels a bit light, doesn't it, if we only did the one? What can we come up with for the Mechanicus and the Knights? They're coming around the corner. Let's just smash out some armies of renown for them, eh?
I don't know. It's a weird one, because obviously the one with, is it Lilith, is a codex supplement.
Yes, codex supplement, yes.
Which is based on a character that is in this book.
Well, the Cult of Strife.
Yes, yeah. Whereas with this one, rather than making a codex supplement, it's specifically an Army of Renown. I kind of get it. I think maybe because this one is built around a particular character that is literally in the book, I sort of feel like they've just given it more love because it makes sense. Whereas the others are a bit, they're Armies of Renown, but they're also sort of generic-y things, right? Oh, you're a Freeblade company. There's no famous Freeblade character in there to give it some oomph, whereas this does.
I'm with you. So in terms of the restrictions,
no. What's the theme, Dan? What's the theme?
Oh, it's Typhus and his Poxwalker pals.
Exactly, floating around on his giant Leviathan ship. Land.
Oh, I see. Sorry, you're gonna read the fluff, aren't you? The narrative. Sorry, I forgot the established format. Exactly. It's almost like we had momentarily taken a break between this part and the two previously, and I'd completely lost track of the format that we had established.
I don't know what you're on about. It's one,
I don't know
one seamless recording.
Oh, of course.
Exactly.
Don't look behind the curtain. The floating beard. So on and so forth. Anyway, please.
Okay.
Please tell us more, Phil.
When the shadow of a dreaded terminus est falls across a world, those lost in its voted gloom, no despair, for surely their doom has come upon them. Do you think I could get a job doing Audible books?
I mean, it sounds to me, Phil, that throughout this podcast, you've just been talking about other forms of employment. Not that obviously you're employed to do this, to be fair. Believe it or not, this is something we do for fun.
Exactly.
That's the kind of sociopaths we are.
No.
We love the sound of our own voice to that extent, or at least I do.
So Terminus Est is meant to be like a giant Leviathan ship.
What's a Leviathan ship?
So I've seen it referenced in the book where they call it Leviathan, and I don't know if it's just talking about it being really big or if it's a particular class of ship. But they do say
aren't Leviathans dreadnoughts?
If you haven't noticed, Games Workshop like to reuse words in plenty of places.
Oh, I see. So it's not them floating around on the back of a Leviathan dreadnought.
No. It's I think it's just like a Leviathan class assault carrier. It's so big.
An est.
It's so big, but it can still land on planets, and then wibbly tentacles come out and disgorge all of its the zombies and chaos warriors, which is what this book is. This Armies of Renown is all about.
Did you feel like EST stands for something like, electronic space transport or something? Is that what it could be?
I mean, it could well be
elongated space transport to describe its size.
It might be like how if you go to university you get some initials after your name.
There you go.
So it's a ship that's been to university.
BST.
Is that name?
Oh no, but BSc. Sorry. Bronze swimming certificate, to reference Red Dwarf, which I'm guessing you didn't get either.
How dare you? How dare you?
How dare you?
I got that reference. I got that one.
Gazpacho soup. Anyway, come on, let's talk about the restrictions. So the restrictions are your army cannot include any units with the vehicle keyword. Oh my. The vehicles are really good in Death Guard for the most part. Yep. So losing out on that is a bit of a downer. Your army cannot include Mortarion, who again,
who's he?
Is pretty good. Who's he? Never heard of him. He hasn't got an est at the end of his name.
He hasn't been to uni.
He hasn't got a bronze swimming certificate. The fool. All units in your army must be Death Guard, and if they are from a plague company, they must be drawn from harbingers. I couldn't pronounce that word at that point, but you know what I meant. Harbingers.
Yeah,
that was the word
correct.
I was supposed to say.
Yeah.
If your army includes Typhus, that model must be your warlord. If Typhus is your warlord, he gains the Harbingers of Death warlord trait in addition to any other warlord traits he knows.
That's cool. Gets an extra.
That is quite cool. What is the Harbingers of Death warlord trait, though, Phil? Even though I appreciate that's us skipping forward to the next page.
Yeah, so it's an aura ability. It's while an enemy model with a leadership characteristic of 7 being the magic number for Nurgle, or less is within 3 inches of this warlord, that model cannot make use of the objective secured rule or any similar abilities, and they can't perform any actions. In addition, while there's 1 or more enemy models within range of this aura, add 1 to your warlord's attack characteristic. Oh my, this is good. I mean,
what's interesting about that, though, Phil, is how does that work with units with multiple leadership characteristics. So a tactical Space Marine, or rather an Inceptor, or an Incursor, or a Intercessor. There's the words. An Intercessor is leadership 7, but its Sergeant makes the squad leadership 8. Do we take the leadership 8, or do we assume that there is a model with leadership 7 there, therefore the unit now cannot perform an action?
Leadership 7. So it says, while an enemy model with a leadership characteristic of 7 is within 3 inches of this warlord, then the abilities say that model's unit can't make use of the objective secured, or the model's unit can't perform any action. So yeah, you take basically the lowest leadership value in the squad, not the highest.
Amazing. So essentially, if you get within 3 of pretty much any troop squad in the game, they're not going to be able to use abilities because, yeah, Space Marines are leadership 7 with their sergeants being leadership 8. So, yeah, that's pretty massive.
Yeah. No, it's a big one. I mean, it's only 3 inches, so it's quite small. But then you can actually get other abilities that buff aura abilities to make that bigger, potentially, as well.
Yeah, so this Harbinger of Death aura doesn't tap into the other Plague aura abilities, the one that expands as time goes on, because they've got that aura of decay, don't they, that they give off.
Contagion, I think.
Oh, aura of contagion. Whatever the case, it's their ability that is -1 toughness, and it extends out from them turn after turn. So it doesn't stack with that. Or it does stack with that, it's just that it doesn't extend with that.
Yes, yeah, correct.
Yeah, interesting. And that is in addition to his other warlord traits, right?
Yeah, so it's a win-win. Because normally characters have a fixed warlord trait. So the fact that you're getting whatever his original one is, plus this as well, is really nice.
There's a pretty big boost, especially with...
At least it's better than the Forge World characters, which get, +1 leadership. Although in this instance, having that +1 leadership would be super useful.
Well, unless you gave it to everyone in the squad. But anyway, irrespective. In terms of the benefits, all units in your army gain the Terminus Est Assault Force keyword. You have access to the Terminus Est Assault Force warlord traits, relics, and stratagems. Death Guard Psychers in your army can generate their psychic powers from the Festa discipline,
Uncle Festa.
which is Uncle Festa, yeah. Festa's Quest. I remember that was a game you liked, Phil.
It is, yeah.
There you go. And then the Terminus Est Assault Force units in your army gain the Outbreak Assault ability described below. So what is Outbreak Assault, Phil?
Yeah, so Outbreak Assault basically is when you're putting units into strategic reserve, use the following table. I won't read it out. It basically means it costs you 1 more CP to put stuff into strategic reserve. But why does it cost 1 more CP, and why is it worth it? Well, if a Terminus Est Assault Force Bubonic Astartes, so this is all keywords in caps and bold, unit is placed into strategic reserve, then in the reinforcement step of one of your movement phases, instead of arriving from strategic reserve as normal, you can just set them up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So rather than coming in from a board edge 6 inches in, you basically can deep strike or teleport or just appear anywhere on the table, because as part of the little flavor text is about the teleportarium flares are flashing and the Marines are actually teleporting in. So that's what's happening here. So super flavorful. Hence why it costs you an extra CP. Probably worth it, though, with that ability. It does only apply to the Bubonic Astartes, so you're talking about your regular Death Guard Marines, not your zombies and stuff like that, which is sort of the other half of what this force is meant to be based on.
So it doesn't actually affect the Poxwalker units, just the Plague Marine units?
Yeah, it's pretty much Plague Marines and the Plague Marine characters that will have that keyword.
And the Blight Lord Terminators as well, right?
Yeah, but they don't need it, obviously, because they're Terminators.
Well, obviously not, yeah, because they're Terminators, so you're going to use it in that sense. So essentially, it's something that makes regular Plague Marines better, which is no bad thing. And again, what's always interesting to remember about this stratagem is it relates to power level. So it's feasible that you can get multiple units into this. So when you pay your 2 CP, it's for a collective power level of between 1 and 9. Now, I believe that the Death Guard units are like 5 or 6 power level base, so it's not feasible that you could get 2 of them into the 1-to-9 ratio.
Well, you might with you might with a unit and a character, for example, though.
True, yeah, that's possible. But yeah, in terms of like the free CP option, where it's going up to the 10 to 19 banding, you could theoretically get as many as again, if they were like 6 power level, you could get like 3 units in there, which actually becomes quite interesting in terms of what you can do with that in gameplay terms. So yeah, I like it. I like the fact that it essentially enables you to come on from anywhere, turn 2 onwards. In a lot of respects, that's one of those funny little rules that often I've seen people forget when playing 9th edition. They just go, now my reserves come on. And they just put them wherever they want. And you're like, no. Get them back there. But anyway, that's how it goes. In terms of stratagems, the first one they've got is Rotting Tide. It is 2 CP or 3 CP. You use the stratagem in the reinforcement step of your movement phase. Select a Terminus Est Assault Force Pox Walker unit from your army that is below half strength and remove it from the battlefield. Or select a Terminus Est Assault Force Pox Walker unit from your army that has been destroyed. Set up that unit at the starting strength, wholly within 6 of any battlefield edge, other than the enemy battlefield edge, and more than 9 away from any enemy models. You can only use this stratagem once if that unit has a starting strength of 10 CP, starting strength of 10 or fewer models, not CP, don't know where that came from. This stratagem costs 2 CP. Otherwise, it's 3 CP. So essentially, if you're going to take a 30-man unit of Poxwalkers and they all get wiped out, 3 CP, bam, there they are again.
That's going to be a real pain to deal with.
That is going to be a real pain to deal with, it's fair to say, especially when Typhus has a number of innate buffs that already go into that squad, right? Like he's already giving extra benefits to the Poxwalkers. So there's a real argument with this army for taking a big 30-man unit of Poxwalkers. They come in 30-man squads now, right? Not 20.
I believe so, yeah. But you still suffer the stipulations when we looked in the Death Guard Codex, isn't it? For each, I don't think it's per model, but for each unit you have of Poxwalkers, you've got to have 1 unit of Bubonic Astartes, right?
Yeah, which Typhus himself is, right? So you can very easily meet that criteria.
Yeah, especially I guess if you're loading up with 20 or 30-man squads as opposed to lots of 10-man squads.
I think if you're going to take Poxwalkers, I think 1 30-man squad in this instance is a good way of doing it. 1, because they don't suffer any morale tests because they're all mindless zombie creatures. But yeah, just the fact that you can, massively increase the efficiency. Okay, sure, you got to spend 3 CP to do it, but the idea that you can just redeploy this unit at full capacity within 9 inches of an enemy is just such a nuisance, especially when you consider the later turns of a game where, both armies are very fatigued. They've taken big chunks out of each other. The ability just to make this reappear is really meaningful.
I've just done a quick check. You can only take them in units of 10 to 20.
It is 20 now. Yeah, I suspected that was the case. Even then, though, a 20-man unit of Poxwalkers is still no slouch, right? Like, that's still going to be something that you're going to need to worry about. So yeah, no, I mean, very strong. Very strong, even though as a unit they're not going to necessarily be one of the most damaging units you're ever going to face. The fact that they are just a nuisance and quite a considerable one is still pretty meaningful. So yeah, and I would argue, I mean, how many points are they? Like 50 points for 10?
Yeah, five a model. So
yeah. So yeah, no, I think that's a pretty healthy exchange because that's basically 3 CP to gain an extra 100 points to your army list. It's no bad thing, is it?
No, not too bad at all.
Although, obviously, that then creates one of those interesting dynamics where if your opponent knows that this is an option, they may then just ignore that Poxwalker unit, which also creates an interesting gameplay synergy because you can essentially rely on the fact that your opponent is going to be disincentivized from firing at them, so you can put them places or use them in ways that make them more valuable because they're not going to be attacked, which is good. I like it. It's a good strat, that.
Yeah. There's another one which combos with Poxwalkers. So you've got Unleash the Horde. Use a stratagem in your movement phase when a Terminus Est Force Poxwalkers unit from your army is selected to move, or in the fight phase when they're selected to fight. Until the end of that turn, add 3 to the moves characteristic of those Poxwalker models in your army, and each time they pile in, they can move an additional 3 inches.
I mean, adding 3 to their pile in is more valuable than adding 3 to their movement, right? Like, because obviously that then transforms them. Well, in terms of the sequence of events, that means that their pile in becomes 6 inches off the back of a, and then they get the 3-inch consolidate afterwards, assuming they manage to kill the thing they go into. So that's like a 9-inch move.
Well, the weird thing is so you can use it in either the movement phase or the fight phase, but it works until the end of your turn. So you can use it in the fight phase. Sorry, you can use it in your movement phase, move an extra 3 inches, charge in, and then you still get the extra 3 inches for your piling in.
Wow. So that really creates one of those interesting kind of like shotgun effects with them, or slingshot effects with them, where you can get guys in and then you get really healthy movement coming in from behind. So yeah, so you could definitely get a lot of Poxwalkers into combat with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 CP, so it's not cheap, but
no.
You've got a lot of kind of movement shenanigans that you could potentially do with that one, just because, yeah, like you're getting at least 6 extra inches.
Yeah,
in your turn.
Yeah. Well, it's and for a unit that is, slow under normal circumstances, that's really strong. Yeah. No, I like that a lot. Then you have, in terms of other abilities, this one is for Terminus Est Assault Force Strategic.
Do you want me to read out the name? Because you've
No. I was trying to look to see what I was actually trying to do was read to see what it affected, because I was trying to remember which this was for specifically. But yeah, it's called Pestilential Drop or something. Pestilential Drop.
Pestilential.
Yeah. Why not? We'll go with that. Pestilential. Everyone's favorite terminology. Use the stratagem
fancy flavored lentils.
Ooh, could I interest you in some pestilentals? It's like, yes, lentils made from pests. What a treat! Like those nutritious food bars they give to the tailies in what is that? Sorry, something was making a load of noise in the background there. The tailies in Snowpiercer. You seen that film?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and it turns out they were eating cockroaches smashed up into nutritional bars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. Spoilers, by the way, for anyone. Yeah, spoilers for that. Although, weirdly, it's never explored in the series version of it. In the movie, they went, look, you're eating cockroaches. Ooh, scary. But in the show, they kind of just brushed past it. Anyway, the point is that you use the stratagem in your reinforcement step of your movement phase when you set up Terminus Est Assault Force units from your army on the battlefield using the Outbreak Assault, page 78, or Teleport Strike ability, see Codex Death card. Select one Contagion of Nurgle ability that unit has. Until the end of the turn, the contagion range of that ability is 12 inches for that unit. This is not cumulative with any other abilities. So you come down from reserves, and now your contagion is spread out to 12 inches. That is good.
Yeah, really good.
That is good.
Because that's reducing their toughness by 1.
That is, alongside any other kind of added abilities that you might have. Again, noting that you're going to have to be a Harbinger. I can't remember what the Harbinger added ability is, but irrespective of that, there are other abilities that come from specific unit types as well. So yeah, the fact that you could increase the aura of certain, contagions, fantastic.
Yeah,
that's very good. Again, well worth 2 CP. That
Yeah.
What's the last one, Phil?
The last one is Callous Disregard. So use this stratagem in your shooting phase. Select one bubonic Astartes Terminus Est Assault Force units from your army that is eligible to shoot. Quite a mouthful. Until the end of the turn, models in that unit can target enemy units within range of friendly poxwalkers or plague followers, which are cultists, from your army. Each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack against an enemy unit within engagement range of friendly poxwalkers or plague units, subtract 1 from the hit roll. So basically, you can shoot at a unit in combat with your poxwalkers or cultists, but you're at -1 to hit. And if a hit roll is not successful, the attack scores a hit against the poxwalkers or plague follower unit instead. Bit punishing, because it's not just, a hit roll of a 1. It's if you just do not succeed. So normally hitting on 3s, you'll be hitting on 4s as Marines. So 1 to 3, you're killing your own guys. Which is why it's completely Callous Disregard. It's kind of fun and flavoursome.
Yeah, it sort of annoys me though that they've made it that it's all misses, because 1s are supposedly always a miss, and it sort of to me seems logical that you should make it that 1 just misses everything. Because I feel like that's more appropriate for the idea of shots firing.
I would do it the other way around. So you're -1 to hit, so you're hitting on 4s, but 1s hit your own guys, and the rest are just assumed to go wild and miss completely. So because 1's always the worst option. So 2 to 3 is you just miss, that's fine. But a 1 is like, oh no, I've hit one of my own guys.
Yeah, see, to me, I feel like in the case of this, I feel like 1 just missing it would be a better way of expressing it. The problem is with it is that it becomes quite cumbersome to express in rules terminology. The notion that any miss is then transferred over into a hit onto the unit, except if you roll a 1, because a 1 always misses. Like, to me that seems logical. But the problem is it's quite it's a difficult rule to express coherently. So I do like the way they've done it. I just sort of feel like there should have been an option for misses still to miss, because that implies that they're not just missing.
I guess it's meant to be like just there's a big crowd that you're shooting into. You're not going to miss because it's such a big blob.
Exactly.
Well, I sort of get it. But yeah,
by the same extension, then why do you miss when you're shooting at a 30-man unit of orcs?
Because they're wow.
You know what I mean?
Don't know. Yeah, I sort of get it. Yeah, it's
I mean, that's fine. Like, I understand that they can't cater for every scenario in a stratagem, but that would be something I would have looked at. However, I love it. I love these kind of interactions. I think this is the sort of stuff we need to see more of. I miss this from the game. There used to be so many brilliant instances where rules like this used to exist. The most beloved one I remember was from Warhammer Fantasy, which was where orc units could charge through goblin units. So if there was a goblin unit in front of you, you could still just go through it, because orcs didn't care about trampling goblins. Like, I just used to think that sort of stuff was so awesome. I can't think of any specific 40k examples.
There's Valhallan regiment has a stratagem that allows you to do that, where you can shoot shoot into a target in close combat with your own guys. And I think on that one, it's only on I think it is on a roll of a 1. It causes a hit against your guys.
Yeah, nice. I was not aware. But yeah, no, I love it. I think more of that, please. I think that kind of aspect to Chaos Space Marines, and the fact that they have these expendable aspects of their army is it's totally,
because I've seen people go, oh, I wish that it would lean more into just the poxwalker like horde mentality, but I like the synergy of the poxwalkers are there to bog down your opponent, and then your elite plague marines are coming in afterwards and sort of mopping up and doing what they want, and the fact they can like teleport in everywhere, I think is super cool.
Yeah, I like the idea of how they are expressing poxwalkers in a thematic idea, like the idea that you are using them as a resource in a combat scenario. If you think about the Walking Dead show back when that was something that everyone was watching, there were so many instances where like a group of enemies to the main group of survivors, Rick and his friends, would use zombies as a distraction technique or use it as a kind of vanguard force that would be herded in first to essentially disrupt the survivors, and then these actual kind of human characters would come in to start to then pick people off and start to prey on the chaos. And I think it's perfectly depicts the idea of what Typhus is doing. Here is a bunch of mindless zombies that are going to cause you problems. And while that's going on, me and my elite Space Marines are going to start picking you apart. I love it. I think it's really cool.
Cool. Should we go on to the next page, which is the Festa Discipline?
I mean, do we need to go into hideous amounts of detail on the Festa Discipline? Do you think people want us to read through every little bit of it?
Well, we can.
I guess we may as well. We've established that's how we're doing it at this point, so we may as well get into it, haven't we?
Exactly. It's
a bunch of psychic powers.
Yeah. The first one is Gifts of Infection. It's a malediction, warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of this psyker.
Warp charge value of 7.
Oh, did I say 6? Sorry, I meant 7. Obviously, it's 7 because they're all 7, I assume, because 7 is the magic number.
That is correct.
In fact, they are all 7. Oh no, one of them 6. One of them 6. Ruining the concept. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of a psyker until the start of your next psychic phase. Subtract 1 from their toughness characteristic. In that of models in that unit, it's not cumulative with any penalties incurred from Contagion of Nurgle ability. So it's effectively using your Contagion of Nurgle 18 inches away on something else.
That is not a Warp Charge 7 ability. That is terrible for Warp Charge 7. If you said to me that was Warp Charge 5, I'd go, yeah, all right. Warp Charge 7?
Well, I think...
-1 toughness.
Well, depending on what it's on. If it's on a toughness 8 vehicle, knocking it down potentially to a 7 could be quite a big deal. But this is the thing that Chaos always suffers with, is they each have a themed number, and sometimes they do try and shoehorn those numbers in, either in terms of points or psychic powers or other things, where it then it doesn't quite balance out. Because as you say, it's 7, because 7 is the Nurgle number, but is it really a Warp Charge 7 psychic power? Probably not.
No, not even close. Especially though, again, I wouldn't mind that if, as you said, Phil, they had established every single ability being Warp Charge 7, but they haven't. There's one here that's Warp Charge 6, and that's where it's
a mistake.
It's
a mistake.
You think that's a mistake? If that's
a mistake, it seems
weird.
It's a bit of an odd one. Because 7
anyway, the other one is Lung Rot, which sounds wonderful. It's a malediction. Lung Rot has a Warp Charge value of 7. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 of this psyker until the start of the next psychic phase. That unit cannot advance. Each time that unit is selected to charge, only eligible units within 6 can be selected the target of its charge. Each time a charge roll is made for this unit, it cannot be re-rolled. Right, okay. That is all right, generally speaking. The inability to advance, and then obviously the fact that you're reducing charge ranges to 6 is relatively strong, especially if you are dealing in the more ITC established ruins based gameplay that they love.
You don't need line of sight, and if you know you're up against a close combat army that isn't deep striking in, then it's got some useful legs to that.
Yeah, I think the fact that you kind of, again, that could be really damaging to like Drakari armies. That could be really damaging to a number of assault armies. Where the Drakari aren't going to care is the fact that that unit isn't going to be on the table for you to cast that power on, because it's going to be within a transport. So you're not going to really benefit from being able to do this to most Drakari units, but certainly that big aggro unit of Scourges that is always in Drakari armies now. this will really annoy them. Not that they don't move ridiculous distances anyway, but yeah, it could make a big dent in what they're intending to do, because the ability to the fact they lose their advance and the fact that they can only charge within 6 does change things massively. So yeah, I like it. I mean, that is worth 7, right? That feels warp charge 7 value. So when you compare that to what we've had previously already, you can start to see where the discrepancies occur. But what's the next one, Phil? Number 3.
The next one is Pernicious Dose. It is a blessing. Warp charge value of 7 as well. If manifested, select one friendly unit within 6 inches of this psyker until the start of your next psychic phase. Each time a model in that unit makes an attack with a plague weapon, you can reroll the hit roll. So plague weapons normally reroll 1 to hits, right? So now you can reroll everything.
They reroll wounds.
Oh, is it 1 to wounds?
Yeah. Well, they either reroll all to wound or they reroll ones. I can't remember the exacts, but they reroll wounds, not to hits. So the fact that it allows you to reroll to hit rolls is pretty...
It gives you a chapter master.
Well, look, here's the thing, right? The best plague weapons are on the vehicles. You can't take the vehicles and get this Festa Discipline. So you're essentially talking about a number of like hand cannons and other kind of like Terminator things. So you're talking about probably some melee weapons or the like flamery type things that they've got, but they auto hit anyway. So I'm trying to kind of think about what gun it is that's going to massively... I think the Blight Hauler or whatever, they've got like a grenade launcher type thing.
Yeah, I mean, it might potentially be more aimed at close combat then.
Yeah, I think that is very much the flavor, because the flail thing, they've got that big flail that the dudes get. Yeah, that would be quite cool. And then obviously the scythes on the Death Shroud Terminators as well are pretty meaty plague weapons. Each time model in that and it's unit as well, right? So yeah, actually, yeah. So you could basically cast that on a unit of Death Shroud Terminators, and they can all get reroll to hits, which is actually pretty significant. Even though they hit on 2s, I think now, but still, and they get reroll 1s with a captain next to them, which is always the way. So effectively, it's not going to massively matter to them,
unless you don't have a captain.
Unless you don't have a Lord of Contagion, as we should say. The next one is Noxious Discharge. Sounds very familiar. It's a Witchfire ability with a warp charge value of 6. The exception that proves the rule. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 12 of and visible to this psyker. That unit suffers 1 mortal wound. All units within 3 of that unit suffer 1 mortal wound, excluding Nurgle units. Fine. So it is a 6-up, do a mortal wound, and then do mortal wounds to all units within 3. I mean, the fact that that's warp charge 6 and -1 toughness is warp charge 7 further expands how -1 toughness is pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I guess they've probably gone, it's not worth 7, because if you look at Smite, for example, that does D3 mortal wounds. This is only doing 1 and then potentially an extra 1 to units within 3. So maybe they've gone, it's not worth 7. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's a bit odd. The fact that this just isn't 7 is weird. But
also what you got to remember is as well is like this if you're up against armies that have really big units like certain horde builds or whatever, you could find yourself in a situation where you've got like a big sprawling thing of orc boys that's going across multiple characters and other units as they're all bundled together. Well, that's doing 1 more wound to that orc boy squad, but then everything that's within 3 of it, which could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
So definitely as the horde meta starts to further establish itself, I think that could be very useful. What's the next one, Phil?
Well, once you've done a Noxious Discharge, you have a Rotwind. So this one is a Malediction. It's a warp charge value of 7, back on track. Select one enemy unit within 18 inches of this psyker. Till the start of your next psychic phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, reduce the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 2, not 1, 2, to a minimum of 0. So, yeah, making your opponent's weapons reduce that AP value by 2 is pretty good. So, multi-melters, -4, suddenly only -2. Not so scary.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, range 18, you don't need line of sight. It's a strong power. You're definitely always gonna have an argument to want to take some Rotwind.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. And then the last one is Accelerated Entropy. So Witchfire, Accelerated Entropy has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, select one enemy model within 12 and or visible to the Psyker. Both players then roll 1d6 and add the model's toughness characteristic. If your result is higher than your opponent's, that enemy model's unit suffers 3 mortal wounds. If your result is double your opponent's or more than double your opponent's, that enemy unit suffers D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. That's pretty strong, especially when you consider that obviously these guys are going to be toughness 5. I don't think outside of Mortarion you're going to get a Death Guard Sorcerer or Death Guard Plague Caster that's going to have a higher toughness than 5. And to be fair, you can't have Mortarion with these abilities anyway, so that's a moot point. But yeah, toughness 5. I mean, again, throwing that around at Tau, throwing that around at Elder, Sisters, anything that isn't a Space Marine or a Necron. Yeah, I mean, doubling that isn't going to be especially difficult if you get a lucky roll. So yeah, no,
D3 plus 3. It's like a super smite, and it's like it does require you to roll a 7, and then you got to beat their toughness. But like I said, if you on the right target, this is pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, more wounds are definitely still really, really strong. The abundance of double wound or 2 wound, baseline models is definitely diminishing some of its impact. It used to feel like in 8th edition that when you got hit with like 6 smite mortal wounds, 6 mortal wounds used to be terrifying in 8th edition. These days, less so because so much stuff has 2 wounds. But yeah, it's still pretty strong. There you go. So yeah, I mean, look, Festa Discipline, all told, it's all right. It's got some interesting options in it. I won't be falling over myself to give myself the gift of infection. But I think there are actually some good things. I think Lung Rot is probably there. That being the stopping advancing and hindering charges. I think the Noxus Discharge would probably be situational, so I probably wouldn't take it much at the time. Again, depending on the build, you might go for the re-rolling to hit with plague weapons, but I think you're probably going to go with Lung Rot and Rot Wind probably is consistently going to be a catch-all option, I would say, in terms of the sorts of psychic powers you'd consider. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have another contender in there?
Rot Wind and Accelerated Entropy, because that last one, it's only 12 inches, but it's pretty powerful. Rot Wind, pretty powerful as well. It's situational against what your opponent's rocking, I guess. If there's a bunch of Eradicators, you'll take it. I think the real downside of this, and I don't know necessarily what the normal Death Guard psychic powers are like, but because the cast value is so high on all of these, and most of them are like maledictions or sort of negatives on your opponent rather than buffs, there might be some better synergies with your overall army with the generic Death Guard stuff, but also you're much more reliable to cast as well. These are, a 7 is the average of what you should get, so you should be able to cast it okay, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like there are obviously some other options that have other sort of synergies, but it's an extra string to your bow. It's something there that you can consider. It's not necessarily a default, I have to take this. It's not a no-brainer, but it's certainly not a bad one. And then lastly, there's a bunch of relics. I mean, again, how much we want to go into this, I don't know.
Yeah, we're on the home stretch. We started a precedence. People are still hanging on in there, painting their models. They want another 10 to 20 minutes of us talking about stuff. Let's give it to them. Fine. Well,
we were going to talk about other things that we wanted, but we've gone like an hour and 40 minutes already without even getting off the baseline topics. I mean, this is the thing. Other people had managed to summarize all of this in 10 minutes.
I know, but that's not what people come here for.
That's not what they come here for.
Plus, there's no previews next week, so what else have we got to talk about other than more of this.
Exactly. I thought we were going to talk about cheating. Wasn't that the thing that everyone's talking about this week?
No,
Dirty cheats.
Do we need
we'll get to that in the outro, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, let's carry on. Relic-wise, you do the first one, Phil. I did the last psychic power. Come on, talk to me about these relics.
Filth censures. Your big balls that you swing around with the billowing of smoke as if you're a priest. That's what these
Lovely.
are. So psychic model only. Add 6 inches to range of psychic powers manifested by the bearer. If the psychic power specifies 2 ranges, i.e. Noxus discharge, only add 6 inches to the first range. Because if you're doing 6 inches from that target unit to do an extra mortal wound, that'd be too good. But yeah, adding an extra 6 inches to all mostly 18-inch range powers, or 12 in some cases, pretty good.
Yeah, I think if you were going to go with some of these festive discipline powers, you're definitely going to want to increase the range. So actually, that relic's really strong, especially in synergy with these abilities. So yeah, no, it's a pretty strong option, to be fair. Then we've got the Mark of the Terminus Est. Add 1 to the bearer's strength characteristic. Each time an attack is made against the bearer, your opponent cannot re-roll the wound rolls. That's very strong. Once per battle, when saving throws is failed for the bearer, you can use this ability. If you do, that saving throw is passed instead.
That's pretty cool.
Once per battle. So bear in mind, that is not a first time you fail, whatever. You can save that for the vital saving throws, so you can hold on to that till you're literally down to your last wound.
But what I like about it is you still get to roll your save first. You don't have to elect to do it, and you don't get to save. So you roll, you fail, then you can elect to do it. And if you've just taken a las cannon that's going to do d6 damage, you'll be like, cool, I'll just pass this one. Whereas when you're getting hit by your bolters, you might not care as much.
Yeah, exactly. And it does obviously create a bit of a risk versus reward thing. Because say, for example, you're on 6 wounds, your Terminator, Lord of Contagion, or whatever it happens to be. They may even have 7 wounds, but I'm going to say 6 for the sake of argument's sake. In those instances, you're never going to actually re-roll that, because the most they can actually do, now that I think about it, is 5, because you natively -1 the damage because you're a Death Guard. So let's say you got 5 wounds. They roll that 6, then you're going to go, but it does mean that you can kind of weigh up whether or not you want to auto pass that save, because you are gambling on, like, will they do 4 damage or will they do 5 damage sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like, because you want to kind of keep it till it really is necessary. So there might come occasions where you auto pass it, but had you chosen not to auto pass it, it only would have done 1 damage or something, because of an unlucky roll.
because you don't know what they're going to roll with that damage roll. But if you're playing against a Sister of Battle who's got a nice, healthy supply of 6s in their fate dice or miracle dice, you'll know when to use it.
But what's also massive is the fact that they can't reroll wounds against you either.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it stacks in a really nice way. I mean, that is a very strong relic. Overall, I think it ticks a lot of boxes, and it comes. I mean, that the thing about it is, it's the fact that it would have been enough just to not reroll wounds and auto pass a save, but the fact they've given you +1 strength as well, it's just it's just all good.
Yeah, it just turns a character into a bit more of a beefy superhero, so to speak.
It's strong.
Yeah,
it's real strong.
The next one is Vomex's Virulent Blight. Model equipped with a plague weapon only. During deployment, select 1 plague weapon, and it gains the following ability. Each time the bearer shoots or fights after making its attacks, select 1 enemy unit that lost any wounds as a result of the attack made with this weapon. Then select 1 Contagion of Nurgle ability the bearer has. To the end of the battle, that enemy unit is always considered to be within contagion range of that ability. Oh, that's pretty good.
It is good, but I feel like it's a little bit convoluted in terms of its execution.
Well,
and I feel like it's something that...
It needs to work on really a ranged weapon to be effective. So each turn, you're just shooting up another unit. Yes, you've got if you've got a bolter, the chances of doing a wound, possibly a bit hit and miss. But if you can have 3 or 4 units going around with -1 toughness or one of the other contagion abilities, then That seems pretty strong. But then,
I mean,
it depends on your playstyle. If you're going to be within, if your unit's going to be within range of contagion abilities anyway, because you're going to play it super aggressively, then maybe go, actually, this is pointless.
Enemy unit always considered to be within. Oh, so it's always considered to be within contagion range, but it isn't itself emitting the contagion, because that would have been really interesting if all of a sudden they became extensions of your contagion, like the idea that they would exude contagion like the rest of your army. Like you could essentially create
a bit like the funnel chimney stack that also has contagion.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, so the idea that you could create expansions to your contagion range within your enemy lines. The thing obviously to note here is that Nurgle famously has very short range weapons if you discount their vehicles, which you have to take these relics. So realistically, you're only going to be getting this off when you're doing melee attacks or when you're doing short range shooting attacks. And in the case of the melee attacks, they're always going to be suffering the negative attributes of your contagion because you're in range of them. So it only really works when you're shooting.
Yeah, I guess when they fall back, if they're an army that's going to be a bit tricksy and run away from you.
True. I suppose if they used an ability to leave and return, then yeah, maybe that's the thing. But it's very edge case. I don't think, again, the first two are very obviously good in their own way. This is just a little bit too the next one is canker. I don't know what a canker is, but there it is. Any thoughts or feelings on the terminology canker?
I love it. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's used in the first Eisenhorn book because there's it's like a canker district or a canker bar. It's basically people with like mutations and stuff.
Check you out.
I presume it's to do with some kind of, modern day terminology, some kind of leper.
Indeed, it's like when they changed the name of what was it now? Consignia. Oh no, that was the post office. Anyway, it was one of those old charity shops. I won't use its original name because it's very offensive now in modern ideology. But you know the one I'm talking about, Phil.
I'm not, but I'll take your word for it.
The Something Society.
I've still got no idea what you're on about.
All right, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Someone in the comments or someone will know what it is. Anyway, so a canker is a range 18 plasma pistol. So essentially, you replace a plasma pistol, it becomes range 18, pistol 1, strength 9, -4 damage, -4 AP, D3 damage, flat 3 damage, and it's a plague weapon. So you basically get a 18-inch range plague weapon plasma pistol. That is actually very good.
Yeah, it's pretty strong. So there's no overcharge. It's just a pistol.
Nope.
So it's safe to fire with abandon.
Yeah, yeah, it's a real good plasma pistol. Damage free, -4 AP, strength 9, plague weapon. Yeah, you. That is one of the better relic guns I've seen in a fair while. Anyway,
yeah.
The
next one's Rock Grip, which I quite like. It's basically a power fist that slowly fuses with the bearer, so it's basically protruding lots of little tubes and rotting flesh. You got a fleshy fist, basically, and it liquefies its victims with a diseased energy field. Sounds pretty cool. So there's a model equipped with a power fist or a plague claw only. Basically, Rock Grip, melee weapon, ×3 strength. Not 1, not 2, ×3. -3
not
AP.
once, not twice, but thrice.
It is thrice cursed, as they say. -3 AP, 2 damage. Yeah. ×3 strength, bit excessive, but pretty cool at the same time. I mean, you're gonna punch those vehicles in the face.
Well, you're still only going to win most vehicles on freeze, though.
Yeah, but if you're strength 4 and you're up against a toughness, well, actually, no, you're up against something that's toughness 8. You'd normally be winning on 4s, but you're within contagion range, so it's a 7.
Oh yeah. So a 7, so you're going to be winning it on a 3.
But now you're ×3. Are you still winning it on 3s?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the edge case is something you would be wounding on a free, like a marine.
What's important here, though, Phil, is you're not -1 to hit with it, right?
Yes, and it's a plague weapon.
Yeah, so you're rerolling 1s to wound. You are not minus to hit. And yes, in instances where you're up against aggressors, which you were wounding on 2s with a normal power fist anyway, because of the fact that they're -1 toughness, when you're up against Wraithguard, you could wound them on 2s now. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, even if the ×3 doesn't do anything great, I mean, it sounds cool. It's like ×3.
It sounds cool.
×3 power fist, baby. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm still only wounding. Oh, hang on. You're toughness 7. You're wounding on 2s now, aren't you? Because it becomes toughness 6. 6 becomes 12. 12. This will be strength 12. So you're double. Yeah. So you would be You'd be wounding toughness 7 vehicles on 2s.
So light vehicles. Here we come.
Here we come, baby. Those rhinos. Bam. Have it. All right, there we go. We worked it out. Reaper of Misery. Here we go. It's like us, Phil. Models equipped with a Man Reaper or a Plague Reaper only. So basically Laws of Contagion. This relic replaces Man Reaper or Plague Reaper and has the following profile. Reaper of Misery. It is a melee weapon. Strength +2, -3, 1 damage. Plague weapon. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, make 2 hit rolls instead of 1. That is useful because if you'll remember, Chaos Space Marines, or rather Death Guard, don't get the +1 attack for charging like they used to. And also they don't have Death to the False Emperor anymore. So having a character now that could be blasting out like 12 attacks with a strength +2, -3 weapon is pretty good. Only damage 1 though. So, but nothing to sniff at.
Yeah, it's a nice little kind of, sweep ability.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever going to take it, but it's all right.
Yeah, the last one is the Rament of Atrophy. So, for the purposes of determining the contagion range of this model's Contagion of Nurgle abilities, treat the current battle round as 1 higher than it actually is. It's not cumulative with any other rules that treat the battle round as being higher than it is.
Thumbs down from me, that one. Boo.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of okay. I guess potentially if you're going to deep strike him down, you in turn 2, but count as being on turn 3, which probably would be within range. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the range of.
Yeah, it's rubbish. It's rubbish. The graphic designer turned around to them and said, I've got room for 1 more.
Yeah, I think the Mark of the Terminus Test is the coolest one out of a lot. It's, +1 strength. They can't re-roll the wound rolls and you just get a free save. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, that's the one you're going to take more often than not. That's the clear winner. For the Psychers, increasing range by 6 is strong as well. Otherwise, and to be fair, the plasma pistol's got a fair shout.
Yeah,
that's a good plasma pistol.
Yeah, I mean, strength 9, and then you get to reroll probably 1s to wound. So that, yeah, and flat 3 damage. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and no overheat as well. It's a real good plasma pistol.
Yeah, not like
so. There you go. Well, there we go. That was us talking through the Armies of Renown that are in the book. I guess now we'll summarize our thoughts on it and then maybe talk about things that we thought might be fun to maybe expect from Armies of Renown in the future. Maybe in the interest of time, though, Phil, we won't go into crazy amounts of detail about what we would like to see for those Armies of Renown, but we'll see how it goes. So, broadly speaking, I think I summarized it perfectly for myself anyway at the start, which is I really like the Armies of Renown system. I think it is a really interesting, flavorful thing. Sure, it might not be the most competitive aspect of the game, but I massively salute and celebrate that. I think ultimately not everything in 40k needs to be done for the 2% of its player base that obsess over tournament play. And I think for people who want to express and ultimately find some creative elements within this book, this is a really great way of bringing those elements to life. And you know, and being able to really inject that flavor into your army and into your collection. So it's a net positive to me. I really like the fact they've done it. I think it's really good.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. I think it brings a lot of longevity into your army list, either because a codex hasn't come out yet and this is catering for some extra rules, or you've got your codex and you've been playing it for a long time, but you just want to mix it up and try something different. So, for example, with your Death Guard, I think what I like about it as well, it's a good challenge as well. It's just not, here's a bunch of rules for free that wildly buff your armies, a bit like what Vigilus did. These are all real kind of hard trade-offs to the point where if you were to do it on a competitive level, you'd probably wince a little bit, and unless you've got a really specific strategy in mind, you probably wouldn't take them, because they're quite narrow-minded in terms of what your army's doing. But I really like that. It's very thematic, and as you say, it's great for sort of fun-friendly games. Great for, you know, especially if you're doing narrative at all. I think this is something that I think that's probably what it's aimed at, right? Like that's who they're targeting with these. And I think what it could mean going for in the future in terms of if every single army gets one or two of these, like that'd be fantastic. It'd be great to see that, you know, because it's not just the codex supplements, which are also in the book. It is a very specific style of army, which I like that they're breathing life into and bringing to. It's like taking the pages of the story and going, this is how you can play that army.
No, I totally agree. So for you, Phil, in fact, I will start because I know you've only thought of one so far, unless you've dreamed up another one in the meantime. In terms of future armies of renown and things that we'd like to see, I had a few options that I thought were really cool, but the first one I wanted to throw out there as a future army of renown that I would love to see is Gabriel Seth and the Flesh Terrors. I think Gabriel Seth's Flesh Terrors would be an amazing army of renown to explore. For those who don't understand the fluff of the lore behind Gabriel Seth's Flesh Terrors, upon the end of the devastation of Baal, Gabriel Seth essentially was brought into the kind of inner circle of the Blood Angels. He was gifted with one of the most sacred relics of the Blood Angels as a kind of keepsake, as a sign of his loyalty and of his legions, or not his legions, sorry, his chapters' renown. But obviously, at the end of that event, the Primaris Marines were indoctrinated into the ranks of the Blood Angels and the Flesh Terrors as well, because both armies were massively depleted. But Gabriel Seth essentially massively rebelled against the notion of having Primaris Marines in the colors of Flesh Terrors, and he essentially decreed that the Primaris versions of the Flesh Terrors were Flesh Terrors in name only, and that the true Flesh Terrors were now working with him to essentially go where the fighting is thickest, and to essentially go on this last crusade. The idea that they are, the last remnants of that old way of the Flesh Terrors, and essentially fighting around the universe, where it is most desperate, in a kind of last ditched effort to sort of, fight back the forces of chaos and other things that are occurring as they effectively fight to their last man. And I love that thematically, the idea of Gabriel Seth essentially, turning away from the Primaris, and effectively him and his other firstborn brethren going out there and stirring things up. And I think, again, you can already start to understand how you would implement the restrictions, but what the benefits would be of that. The idea of, you can't take anything Primaris, but you gain all these amazing combat attributes, and the idea that these guys are absolutely fighting tooth and nail, like they are really pushing themselves to prove their worth and to, go out in a blaze of glory. They've all gone ham, essentially. So the idea of how you could portray that in an Armies of Renown really excites me. So that would be one that I would throw out from the start, Phil? I mean, what do you reckon? Gabriel Seth and his firstborn buddies smashing up things.
Yeah, I was almost tempted to say it's not really an Armies of Renown because that is just a Space Marine army. But with the stipulation that they're firstborn only, I like that's a good little caveat. It does tick your box a bit like the Dark Angels. I hate Primaris.
I don't hate Primaris. I just don't understand why they're in the Dark Angels.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very similar vibes. Is all I'm saying. There's a theme, I sense, from your when you talk about Primaris.
There's definitely a theme to it, but I think to continue that point though, that still to me is one of the most kind of untapped areas of potential within the lore. The fact that they've essentially just said all the Space Marines get along now and they're all on board with being Primaris just kind of upsets me from a kind of, not because I care about it in terms of what it represents on the tabletop and all this stuff. Like I'm totally cool with Primaris. I own a lot of Primaris. I have Primaris only armies, blah, blah, blah. I like the range. I'm just saying, to me, the thing that upsets me about it is not Primaris itself. It's just the lost potential. It's like, it would have been cool. It would have been cool if they did more with it. The fact that they just kind of went, oh yeah, now all the Space Marines are cool with it. It's like, all right, fine. Here's what it is. I'm not bitter about it. I just feel like it's a shame because it feels like we could have gotten more out of it. That's all.
Well, that's true, and agree to a lesser extent. But yeah,
no, of course, I know you're less passionate about that point, and it's weird in a way that I come across that I am. I just sort of feel like, again, I just sort of think, from my perspective, I just think there's so much narrative potential there, the kind of infighting and all that stuff.
No, I
just think it's interesting.
Yeah.
But they did, this is the thing, early on, they did have these little threads, such as Gabriel Seth. Gabriel Seth was documented as just going off and going, nah, I'm not having it. These are just Gilliman's kids in my color scheme. Whatever, I'm off, and he's just gone out into the places where it's all getting really leery, and he's basically just like, cool, I'm on a death quest or whatever. I'm just literally here till someone kills me. So I love it.
That sounds good.
Who would you go for?
Well, I'll do my first. I came up just instantly with a better idea, but I'm going to save that till the second round. The first one was my original idea, which is, big props to my boy Richie and his Elysians. So this is not just Elysians, because that's just a standard regiment. It's the Elysian D99s, the sort of special force elite of the elite drop troops. So I guess in terms of rules, ignoring we're not using the Elysian range, we're using standard Astra Militarum. So I have to be themed a bit more around scions, I think. Flyers, no tanks, no other vehicles except flyers, no abhumans. Go for proper like guard, scions, flyers, that sort of thing. And obviously they all had like, was it in the past, in the old Forge World books, they all had Ballistic Skill of 3+, including their flyers as well. So that would be like their bonus. Probably have a couple more negatives around it as well. But yeah.
They the other thing about the D99s were they were much more heavily integrated into the forces of the Inquisition, right? Order Xenos, I believe. I think they were because they actually trained Order Xenos regiment.
Yeah, because they were dealing with killing Tyranids, or there was like an outbreak of Tyranids that were being tested upon, that they then had to deal with, if I recall correctly.
They were also quite heavily involved in conflicts with the Eldar, weren't they?
It was either Eldar or Tau, or maybe all three, because I think there was a couple of campaign books that they featured in.
Yeah, I think they appeared in the Doom of Mama campaign.
Yeah, and whatever the Tau one was as well, I think.
Yeah, potentially the Tau. I can't remember the name of the Tau one. As it is, I can barely remember the name of the Doom of Mama, but that's sort of how I broadly remember it.
Quite often hang out with those Red Scorpions as well, if I recall.
Yeah, which obviously Richie's embraced really well. But I like the idea of, like, if you were to integrate them more with inquisitorial henchmen, so the idea that there's actually more of the notion that you can take the HQ just from Inquisitors, and those Inquisitors can just be your HQ, so not just agents of the Imperium. They actually are the leadership structure, or integrated into it as a legit HQ choice as opposed to an optional extra. I think that could be a really cool flavor.
I'll tell you what, this leads on to my second army, which was...
Okay, well, are you going to go straight into the second one, or are we going to alternate? How do you want to do it?
I'm going to go straight into it because you've kind of, you've kind of just said it. It's basically an Inquisition force where you can have a mixed range of units. So it's like, I'm going to have some Scions because they're my elite crack troops to go with my Inquisition, but I'm also going to have a squad of, Death Watch Xenos hunters, because why wouldn't my Inquisition army have access to all of this stuff? So an army that could potentially unlock lots of units from across the wider Imperium that you can then have in a detachment on its own, and mix and match, which you don't really get anymore, because this is almost like early 8th edition when you could soup detachments. So yeah, I like the idea of picking and choosing lots of cool elements, because a lot of the really interesting Inquisition units are now sort of with the Sisters of Battle, with Archoflagellants and stuff. It's like, but they were kind of classic Inquisition units that they don't get access to anymore. So it'd be nice to have something that harks back to that kind of classic era of Inquisition.
Yeah, I think something like that would be really cool if they started to integrate or create more kind of mixtures of things. So it's not just one specific army, but it's the opportunity to create one army out of multiple sources, kind of like the Ynnari. So obviously Armies of Renown Ynnari would probably make sense in the future. But yeah, something in that kind of vein sounds pretty cool. I think for me, the last one I was going to say, amongst the many ideas that I had, was Farsight Enclaves. The Farsight Enclaves obviously are more likely to be a Codex supplement than an Army of Renown, but I do feel like there's an argument for both. I feel like in terms of them being a Codex supplement, I'd be totally fine with that, because they do consistently now go back and work with the Empire, simply because of the kind of mutual respect that Shadow Sun and Farsight have for each other, but also just because of the escalating threat that the wider universe represents. But I do think an Army of Renown adaptation of Farsight Enclaves would be really cool in the future, and it would be a really good thing that they could potentially lock the 8 behind, because the 8 at the moment can be pretty much taken in any Tau army that you want to run them in. But if you take them in a full army of their own making, I think that would be really cool. And the restrictions would very much be what they are presently, which is like you can't take ethereals, because the Farsight Enclaves have abandoned the ethereals and aren't really, super chummy with them. And then you would also look to restrict certain war gear that they access. So maybe some of the more advanced battle suits that they've got access to these days within the broader Empire wouldn't be available. So like the Storm Surge, which is the big missile carrying heavy weapon Lord of War suit, and that kind of thing would potentially not be an option to them. But yeah, I'm only saying that because I'm working on my Farsight Enclaves army at the moment, and I'm quite excited about them. I think they're a fun little army.
Yeah, sounds like a good option for sure.
Indeed. Obviously, there are many more options that we could go into and discuss in more detail, but I feel like that's probably enough on this topic at this time. But obviously, if there are any Armies of Renown that you, the listeners, would like to see in the future, why not tell us about it? And then we'll probably talk about it and read it out and have some interaction, because that's a thing, isn't it, that you can do in these sorts of modern forms of media, right?
Well, exactly. That almost ties in nicely with talking about the community questions.
Well, indeed. So let's get to that now after this transitional noise. Woo! All right, guys, it's that end of the show now, the bit where we talk about community questions and general nonsense that we've been thinking about throughout the general world of hobby. Fun fact, we tried to talk about cheating, but I realized I really couldn't be bothered because I don't care. Cheaters are gonna cheat, whatever, right? Moving on with our lives. Unless you had anything interesting to add to that topic, Phil.
No, not at all, because I'll just set you off again.
Well, you won't set me off because I've realised it's not a topic I'm interested in discussing at all. Because who cares?
Neither am I, really. Let's talk about community questions. Yay.
Yeah, let's have a fun time. Let's not deal with that. Hey, Phil, what do you think about? We sort of talked about at the start, though. What do you reckon about this pre-orders going away? What's that all about, eh?
Well, it makes sense. Obviously, supply chain drama, stuff like that. Well,
the NASDAQ, something or other.
Well, I think there's a bunch of reasons behind it. Obviously, they did something similar around this time last year because they
because of COVID.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what it is. You know, probably a combination of that and what was it, the Evergreen incident in terms of getting stuff over. There was a bit of a shock and drama about Curse City going around social media this week because people were assuming that it was going to be a regular release like Blackstone Fortress that will stick around for a year. It's like Blackstone Fortress, the core set you can still buy, although I think it's temporarily out of stock. The assumption
I was in a Games Workshop store the other day, and they still had Blackstone Fortress on the shelves.
Yeah. So the assumption was that Curse City would be like that, and apparently, it obviously sold out really well, sold out super quickly, and everyone assumed it would just, it will come back at some point. But apparently, there's been a couple of social media posts from Warhammer community saying, "Yeah, sorry, that was it." But then I think they've also taken those down, so it's a bit of a weird, confusing message where they've not really explained if they're doing it, if they're supporting it, if there's going to be expansions to the game, or if there was, but because of COVID and supply issues, they've changed their mind or not. If they will do a reprint of the box like they did with Indomitus. Was there ever meant to be a reprint and they've just changed their minds? Who knows? So that's been going on. So which does, to an extent, explain why they've also gone with pausing pre-orders, because obviously they're not closing down the factory. They're just going to be allowing them to, get a stockpile of stock, for want of a better word. So they, when they can do pre-orders, they can kind of get the ball rolling again with less delay.
You know what you just reminded me of, though, Phil, talking about the stuff, is that I just got a bunch of my stuff back off Joe the other day because once upon a time, I used to rely on Joe to paint stuff for me, which was kind of like trying to rely on, I don't know, some very, very unreliable person to do anything. So I gave Joe a bunch of my stuff, and he returned a bunch of it. You know what was missing from it was my copy of Space Hulk that I gave him. So now I've just remembered that, and I'm going, hang on a second here. Where's my copy of Space Hulk? He better not.
Oh.
I bet he sold it. He's such a greasy little goblin.
It was funny. I bought on eBay this week the cat, the little drone thing with a servo skull on it, because I saw that online and thought, well, that's a cool model. Purchase on
that was from Sexel. Well, it might have been broken down from my copy of Space Hulk that Joe is, secretly selling off.
Exactly. If he's eBay seller 1138, that's him.
What a catchy title. He wanted it because he was like, Dan, I'll paint the Terminators for you for the Blood Angels army. And I was like, all right, yeah, sure. And I gave it to him, but he hasn't given it back to me. And he gave me everything else. So I'm a bit like, hang on a second here. He's either thought that that's actually his game now and he's taking it for himself. More likely than not, if that is the situation, he will have already sold it because he will have forgotten that it belongs to me, and he's definitely sold it. Well, I add that to the ongoing.
He's not allowed back on the show.
Oh, the thing is, right, I love the guy. I would welcome him back if the opportunity presented himself, but he is so unreliable. I don't think it would make sense to do so. He's just, if he sold it, though, I will be legitimately angry with him. I'll be quite annoyed.
You can update listeners next week.
I will. Has Joe sold Space Hulk? Yes, quite clearly, but let's wait and see. I wonder how much he got for it. That'd be the thing that annoys me the most. He probably got like 20 quid and maybe some, a rub down or something.
Well, yes, maybe.
Anyway, look, let's do the community questions. It's fine. Yeah, look, limited releases Curse City was a bit of a bummer, right? Because Curse City was really cool, and I suppose some people missed out on it. But I don't know with those kind of game systems though, right? Because everyone sort of gets all excited about them and goes, "Oh, I really, really want it," and then you buy it and you never play it. Like so consistently, that is the case with that. Like I bought Shadow over Hammer. I've never played it. I bought Silver Tower. I played that a lot, but Shadow I didn't bother. So I didn't bother with Curse City because I was like, well, I've got the Twisty Tower one, the tower,
Silver Tower,
whatever. Silver Tower, thank you. I've got Silver Tower, so I'll play Silver Tower. If I want to scratch the Warhammer Quest itch, I'll just play Silver Tower. That'd be fun.
True. I mean, I've got the original Warhammer Quest. I got Curse City because I like the aesthetic of it, and it's the closest incarnation to that original Warhammer Quest, which I liked. Silver Tower, I didn't quite like the aesthetic as much, and the setting, even though I kind of got it. Like, I just didn't like it as much. Wasn't as like grounded. I did have Space Hulk, which I literally sat on for years, and then I sold it like a year ago because it's like I'm never gonna play it. Never did play it. So yeah.
I mean, all too often that is the situation with those specialist board game releases. They just kind of accumulate. Like I bought Kingdom Death Monster for something absurd, like $400. Never played it once. Tried to read the rulebook and went, wow, this is horrible. So if anyone wants to make me an offer on an original printing of Kingdom Death Monster, please throw it my way. I've only assembled like one model in it. I really don't want it anymore. You can literally offer me like $100 for it, and you can have it if you come get it. I'll drop it off somewhere. I really don't care. I want the space more than I want that. But anyway, moving on. Community questions. Oh, actually, one last thing. Sorry, Phil. I know I keep dragging us back in. What do you reckon of the orc stuff they showed off? You excited about a beast snagger?
Yeah, looks all right. Looks kind of cool. Kind of want to see more. It'll be interesting if they're 2 wounds, these guys. If they are...
They will be 2 wounds.
Fabled, rumoured Primaris orcs. And do you remember, God, it was probably like 5 years ago. No, maybe 4 years ago when the rumour of Primaris orcs came out. So if that's the real delay between the original rumor mill of new armies and what's actually finally coming out, that could just be a coincidence because obviously orcs are going to be due for a refresh at some point. But the 2 wound orcs, and the other one was Kroot army, and then the other one after that was like kind of like dark space wolves. So it was what's his name? The old Space Wolves Primarch.
Oh, Lehman Russ. You should know
yeah. Sorry, Lehman Russ comes from the warp and is slightly chaosified with his warpified, potentially loyalist Space Marines. Yeah, I thought
that'd be really cool. That'd be really cool. I like the idea of like the way that this is the thing, right? One thing I will say about the Primaris Orcs versus the Primaris Marines is I feel like they have evaluated how Primaris Marines went, you know what would have been sensible is we just went, it's an orc, but it's bigger. And then just when it's still an orc. It doesn't diminish the orcs that exist. It's just a bigger orc. And then, you know, because in a way, again, going back to the Primaris topic, that would have been cool if they just went, it's a Space Marine in a different suit of armor. He's a bit bigger as a result. It's like, cool. That would have been fine. You don't need to, you know, take away all the Space Marine stuff. You just enhance it. And the same is now going to be the case with this orc unit, where it's like, it's a bigger orc, but your orcs are still valid. It's all one thing. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that they do, and we've talked about it loads, where basically they don't just, well, they do sometimes refresh an army, like Necrons. They got brand new Necron warriors, whereas with Space Marines and some of the Necron models, they were like, you can have those original ones, but here's a newer, slightly better version of it, but it's something totally different, but it's kind of just a better version of this other thing. So they're sort of having their cake and eating it in terms of you still got your old models, you can still buy them, but you can also buy these other things that are just bigger versions of that thing.
Yeah. Which I'm fine with, though, right? And I think that is probably the way it should just consistently go. But yeah, I think, again, it's going to come down to one of those situations where they're going to be like, cool, there you go, there's a new orc unit. So now someone who's actually painted 120 orc boys is not going, oh, I now need to repaint 120 orc boys. They're saying to themselves, oh, I can add a couple units of these to my army. And then, oh, they're cool. Oh, and then I'll add a couple of these things, and I'll add a couple. And then before you know it, you've got an expansive collection of the newer, larger scale stuff. And then maybe it phases out some of the other stuff over time, but it hasn't rendered it completely worthless. Whereas I feel like that's kind of different with Space Marines.
Well, I mean,
did it.
I don't think any Necron player is going, oh no, I've got to repaint all my Necron warriors.
Well, they don't have to, do they? They just continue to use the one they've got.
Well, that's my point. If they redid the Orc Boys, they don't. No one has to redo them, right? No one.
No.
You could go out and rebuy them because you go, oh, the scale's a bit different, and I want a consistent army. Totally at liberty to do that, but you also don't need to do that either.
My only point about that Orc boy that I wanted to bring up and wanted to discuss with you really though is looking at it, do you speculate that we are looking at relatively monopose figures, or do you suspect that unit will actually have a degree of posing to them? Because the way it's structured, the way it appears with the muscles and things that they've kind of shown on it, it looks like it's going to be pretty mono build in terms of how you sculpt these guys.
Yeah,
it doesn't look like you've got many options to it.
I mean, name me a modern kit that isn't monopose beyond a dreadnought. Like anything that's humanish, like even Sisters of Battle, they're all pretty much monopose now. Space
pretty much, yeah.
All monopose. It's like, yeah, you get some flexibility potentially with a single sword arm or pistol arm where you can, position it up or down to an extent. But do you know? And we can always have a discussion about monopose models. I think it's really good. You get so much more interesting dynamic looking models. Yeah, if you've just got 3 or 4 models that you've got to replicate several times, it looks a bit weird. And it's going to be harder. Like with Space Marines, I think it's super easy to kit bash, cutting at the joints or posing the arms to be slightly different if you want them to. Orcs, I think, would be a bit harder because you've got loads of fleshy muscle that you'd have to like work around and sculpt to an extent if you did want to like change an elbow pose or something. But I think the trade-off is just, much more beautiful models. So it's worth it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because and you're absolutely right. Like, it's one of the strangest things when you start working with the Primaris Marine kit and you realize how little flexibility there is in the posability of it. But where the posability and the flexibility comes in is in all the different head sculpts, all the different arm options that you can start to put on it. And then how you kit bash across multiple things. Like the Assault Intercessor box was the best thing they added to that range because it gave you another set of 5 dynamic body poses. But more than that, it gave you loads of weapon options. So I feel like, yeah, that really shaked things up for them, plus everything else that's going on with it. But again, Orcs probably won't get that same level of support, so it's going to be interesting to see how that starts to play out over time.
Yeah, I imagine there'd be a bit more like Sisters, where, if you think about things like Repentia that are like barely dressed, it's like, I imagine it'd be like that. They're all single monopose sculpts. Is there going to be a bit of interchangeability between taking one torso and giving them another arm? Yes, but you're going to have to pin it or cut it up and glue it in place. And I think that's where the real creativity lies in any kind of conversion kit bashing, is doing those sorts of things. But it's a bit of a skill in and of itself, but it's one of the best things about the hobby, I think. So you just got to embrace it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I don't think it's that bad in the case of Repentia, for example, if you have a 20-woman squad of them, it isn't really that ridiculous if a lot of them are in similar poses. Because again, it's one of the limitations of the format, really, and you just kind of accept that if you're not willing to or able to convert and change things up.
Yeah, I mean, quite often
how it is.
Yeah, I mean, quite often you get things like you'll get two similar leg poses, but 2 optional like torsos, so you can sort of swap between them. So even within mono pose, they do to an extent have like some flexibility. It's like the new Slanesh demon thing that they revealed this week, which is like this flying monstrosity, and it's like floating on its the trail of its cloak thing. And it's like, if you actually look at the two side by side, they're really similar looking, but they're different, and it is like playing spot the difference. And it's like, they are unfortunately almost, to my mind, they're a bit too similar. It's like, I get it because they're using the exact same kit, and there's only a few subtle differences in terms of a headpiece or an arm swap or a weapon swap. And then one of them, because they both got this big amazing like fanned back piece, but one of them just has a bit of the back piece missing, which makes it different. Like if one of them was somehow like inverted upside down or something, it would give it a slightly different silhouette. But ultimately, it's like there's only so far you can do from one base kit to make it look different, but still using the same major components.
Also, as well, though, it massively depends on how many of those you're ever going to see in someone's army, right? Like, depending on how that plays out in game, you know, it probably isn't going to be incentivized for you to have more than one of it. So, you know, it doesn't really matter if it looks incredibly similar. It looks different enough that you know what the difference is between the two of them, but you're only ever going to see one on the battlefield anyway, so who cares, right? Unless, you know, in those instances, like, it's not a big problem.
Yeah.
Unless someone takes two of them, in which case, or takes one of each, as it were. But I don't think that's what you're going to see. I don't think, because I also think people will just get annoyed with that visual, and they're probably like, now, unless the rules are crazy, which they could be, but.
Well, I mean, for that thing in particular, I imagine it's some kind of character or named thing where you can only have one of them anyway, right?
Yeah. It's just, that's the thing, right? Intriguing for certain. Let's do those community questions then, Phil. Come on now. We've addressed some points.
Finally there. Let's get to it. So Garfield _RFW, our old Londoner friends. He says, which armies of renown would you like to see? We've done that, Garfield.
We have done that, yeah. But to reiterate, we were saying, you said...
I said Legions, D99s, and Inquisition sort of requisition forces. Also, tank company only style of army, I think would also be good.
Or you're throwing that in as an extra?
Just throwing it in.
I went with Firstborn Flesh Terrors, Farsight Enclaves, but if I could throw another one into the mix, I think the Chaos Space Marines of the Crimson Slaughter would be a cool thing to see in the Armies of Renown. How you represent that and what restrictions you put into place, I would need to kind of think about. I feel like the problem is with the Chaos Space Marine range is it's an interesting one, but I think the thing with the Crimson Slaughter is they're a recent Traitor Legion, so they're not not Traitor Legion. They're a recent Renegade chapter. So they were a Loyalist chapter who encountered a wibbly thing, and then they were turned to Chaos. And essentially, the only way they could quell the pain and suffering they felt was by going out and like shedding blood and being all like going out there and fighting, which would make you think, oh, these guys are like a Khorne chapter. But actually, they succumbed to Tzeentch, which I thought was really interesting as well. So you could add some interesting elements in there, like give them like loads of like mutations and things, because they're all kind of really, really messed up. So I don't know. Crimson Slaughter. I like Crimson Slaughter. More Crimson Slaughter, please.
Cool. So Garfield also says he'd like to see the Valhallan regiment that sends in wave after wave of infantry towards the enemy, Stalingrad style. Which is exactly what Valhallans already do. So they do have a stratagem that allows them to send in another unit, I'm pretty sure. Or at least they did a long time ago. So that's pretty cool. He also says...
Yeah, no, good suggestion.
He says another one, which I knew you were going to mention, which was Khorne Demonkin.
Oh, you knew I was going to mention? Yeah, I didn't mention.
Well, we talked about it beforehand and we went about it in depth, but just not on the recording.
That is true. Khorne Demonkin is definitely something I'd love to see return. I'd like to see all flavors of Demonkin, though. I feel like if it was something that they could really explore with like Slaanesh and Tzeentch and everything. Because I think, again, you could indoctrinate that into a number of different flavors. Where Khorne makes the most sense was the idea that Khorne effectively, the World Eaters really got into it with Khorne, and so many of the like units were really kind of on board with it. Whereas in the case of, say, like the Thousand Sons, they don't actually really like Tzeentch that much. So you couldn't necessarily express that with the Thousand Sons, but you could have that as, again, the Crimson Slaughter, for example. So Crimson Slaughter could become like a Tzeentch Demonkin. Because Khorne Demonkin aren't themselves World Eaters. They're something else entirely. They're just like a kind of like demon worshipping Chaos Space Marine faction that synergizes perfectly with demons. So yeah, it's cool. It's a great idea. I'd love to see Demonkin return. I'll miss him. I'll miss my blood tithe points.
Yeah, it was good fun. Now we're on to the last one already. We didn't get many commenters this week.
No, well, that's fair enough. Not very many people care about Armies of Renown. I'm sure we'll see that reflected in our download things.
It was because we surprised them, and I did this post on Monday, whereas more recently I've been doing it on Wednesday, so snuck it in early, maybe.
That's what it is. That's what you tell yourself. We're not as popular as we used to be.
Clearly not. But yeah, so the last one is from 2-Bit Paints. He says, I like the way Death Guard and Dark Elder felt like they were a specialist detachment if you wanted to take a named character as your warlord without being an auto take for their faction. The Free Blade and the Defense cohort are nice additions, but I don't see them being used a lot outside narrative, as they have some serious trade-offs. And thematically, I'd rather run a custom Forge World with my own self-imposed unit limitations, which sounds pretty good. What would you like to see introduced as an Armies of Renown? Well, we've done that 2-Bit Paints already. We've done it.
We've done it. Can you think of one more, Phil?
Well, I could go in more detail into my tank company.
Krieg. Just Krieg.
Well, actually, no, I would. Krieg, horses, as just all
Death Riders of Krieg.
Just all Death Riders.
Yeah, but that's what everyone's doing when they run Krieg anyway now, isn't it?
But unfortunately, so yes.
Unfortunately, you just said you wanted it as an Army of Renown.
Well, I think no, but I mean, it's only unfortunate because it feels like that is the only way to play Krieg at the moment, is to go heavily into the engineers and Death Riders. So I think a lot of people are just taking Death Rider detachments, or in addition to their standard army, like Astra Militarum army. So yeah, I think just taking pure Death Riders could be an interesting themed one. I mean, the other one would be the kind of, because in, what was it, 7th edition, in the last Siege of Vrax book, there was 2 specialist detachments. I've mentioned it loads. One of them was all Death Riders. The other one was the like Gorgon assault spearhead, I think, and it was several Gorgon transports, just loads of infantry. That was pretty much all you could take, and you got a bonus for charging your guys out of those Gorgon transports. That'd be great, but you can't because the Gorgon is in Legends now, so boo-hoo.
Boo-hoo, indeed. Well, there we go. That pretty much wraps up the show, I reckon, Phil. That was a healthy amount of conversation on the topic of Armies of Renown. We hope you enjoyed listening along wherever you may be. Any final thoughts on everything that was discussed today, Phil? Did you enjoy yourself? Did you have a nice time?
I did. Yeah, I'd be very good. Next week I'll be doing this from Bath, in the new studio. Yeah. Oh, good. That's nice. I mean, next week, what are we actually going to talk about? I think we came up with some potential ideas in the last episode in terms of other gaming-related topics that we could generally discuss. The problem with vehicles. All sorts of things. I did have a couple of, actually. I did have a couple of community questions that weren't on the comments. They slid into my DMs, so to speak. One of which had ideas for future episodes.
Oh, I see. Well, let's save that for another time, Phil, because it's now 1 a.m. and I feel like everyone's had enough by now. So we can talk about that next episode, wouldn't you say? Or potentially have it as a topic.
No, but yeah, be a nice tease.
Be a nice tease. That'll do. We love a good tease. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.